Hello there, Sean the Extra Guy here. Welcome to Sean by the Fire. So this video is a compilation of all the chapters I've read for book 1, and the only difference with this is basically I've re-recorded chapters 1 and 2 plus the intro, and there's also a slight change in chapter 8. But other than that, there's no changes to the other chapters. And also, we got a black screen for the entirety of the duration. So for those of you who don't have premium, or you just want to have it on the TV if you're in bed or on the lounge, whatever it is, it's just black screen. No visuals, no title cards. This is the only time that there's ever going to be something on screen. But anyway, enough chatter for me. Please enjoy listening. Redwall, Book 1, The Wall, by Brian Jacques. Who says that I am dead knows naught at all. I am that is. 2 mice within Redwall. The warrior sleeps, twixt hall and cavern hall. I am that is. Take on my mighty role. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth. At night, when day's first hour reflects the north. From o'er the threshold, seek and you will see. I am that is. My sword will wield for me. Rhyme from beneath the great hall tapestry. It was the start of the summer of the late rose. Mossflower country shimmered gently in a peaceful haze, bathing delicately at each dew-laden dawn, blossoming through high sunny noontides, languishing in each crimson-tinted twilight that heralded the soft darkness of June nights. Redwall stood foursquare along the marches of the old south border, flanked on 2 sides by Mossflower Wood's shaded depths. The other half of the abbey overlooked undulating sweeps of meadowland and its ancient gate facing the long dusty road on the western perimeter. From above it resembled some fabulous dusky jewel, fallen between a green mantle of light silk and dark velvet. The first mice had built the abbey of red sandstone, quarried from pits many miles away in the northeast. The abbey building was covered across its south face by that type of ivy known as Virginia creeper. The onset of autumn would turn the leaves into a cape of fiery hue, thus adding further glory to the name and legend of Redwall Abbey. Chapter 1. Matthias cut a comical little figure as he wobbled his way along the cloisters, with his large sandals flip-flopping and his tail peeping from beneath the baggy folds of an oversized novice's habit. He paused to gaze upwards at the cloudless blue sky, and tripped over the enormous sandals. Hazelnuts scattered out upon the grass from the rush basket he was carrying. Unable to stop, he went tumbling cow over tail. Bump! The young mouse squeaked in dismay. He rubbed tenderly at his damp snub nose while slowly taking stock of where he had landed, directly at the feet of Abbot Mortimer. Immediately Matthias scrambled about on all fours, hastily trying to stuff nuts back into the basket as he muttered clumsy apologies, avoiding the stern gaze of his elder. Sorry, Father Abbot. I tripped, you see. Trod on my abbot, Father Abbot. Oh dear, I mean... The Father Abbot blinked solemnly over the top of his glasses. Matthias again. What a young buffoon of a mouse. Only the other day he had singed old brother Methuselah's whiskers while lighting candles. The elder's stern expression softened. He watched the little novice rolling about on the grass, grappling with large armfuls of the smooth hazelnuts, which constantly seemed to escape his grasp. Shaking his old grey head, yet trying to hide a smile, Abbot Mortimer bent and helped to gather up the fallen nuts.
"Oh, Matthias, Matthias, my son," he said wearily. "When will you learn to take life a little slower, to walk with dignity and humility? How can you ever hope to be accepted as a mouse of Redwall when you're always dashing about, grinning from whisker to tail like a mad rabbit?"
Matthias tossed the last of the hazelnuts into the basket and stood awkwardly shuffling his large sandals in the grass. How could he say aloud what was in his heart? The abbot put his paw around the young mouse's shoulder, sensing his secret yearnings, for he had ruled Redwall wisely over a great number of years and gained much experience of mouse life. He smiled down at his young charge and spoke kindly to him.
"Come with me, Matthias. It is time we talk together."
A curious thrush, perching in a gnarled pear tree, watched the two figures make their way at a sedate pace in the direction of Great Hall, one clad in the dark greeny brown of the Order, the other garbed in the lighter green of a novice. They conversed earnestly in low tones. Thinking what a clever bird he was, the thrush swooped down on the basket that had been left behind. Twisters! The basket contained only hard nuts locked tight within their shells. Feigning lack of interest lest any other birds had been witness to his silly mistake, he began whistling jauntily a few bars of his melodious summer song, strolling nonchalantly over to the cloister walls in search of snails. It was cool inside Great Hall. Sunlight flooded down in the slanting rainbow-hued shafts from the high, narrow-stained glass windows. A million colored dust motes danced and swirled as the two mice trod the ancient stone floor. The Father Abbot halted in front of the wall, in which hung a long tapestry. This was the pride and joy of Redwall. The oldest part had been woven by the founders of the abbey, but each successive generation had added to it. Thus the tapestry was not only a priceless treasure, it was also a magnificent chronicle of early Redwall history. The abbot studied the wonderment in Matthias's eyes as he asked him a question, the answer to which the wise mouse already knew.
"What are you looking at, my son?"
Matthias pointed to the figure woven into the tapestry. It was a heroic-looking mouse with a fearless smile on his handsome face. Clad in armor, he leaned casually on an impressive sword, while behind him foxes, wildcats, and vermin fled in terror. The young mouse gazed in admiration. "Oh, Father Abbot," he sighed. "If only I could be like Martin the warrior. He was the bravest, most courageous mouse that ever lived." The abbot sat down slowly on the cool stone floor, resting his back against the wall.
"Listen to what I have to say, Matthias. You have been like a son to me, ever since you first came to our gates as an orphaned woodland mouse, begging to be taken in. Come, sit by me, and I will try to explain to you what our order is all about. We are mice of peace. Oh, I know that Martin was a warrior mouse, but those were wild days when strength was needed. The strength of a champion, such as Martin. He arrived here in the deep winter when the founders were under attack from many foxes, vermin, and a great wildcat. So fierce a fighter was Martin, that he faced the enemy single-pawed, driving them mercilessly, far from Mossflower. During the rout, Martin fought a great battle against overwhelming odds. He emerged victorious after slaying the wildcat with his ancient sword, which became famous throughout the land. But in the last bloody combat, Martin was seriously wounded. He lay injured in the snow until the mice found him. They brought him back to the abbey and cared for his hurts until he regained his strength. Then something seemed to come over him. He was transformed by what could only be called a mouse miracle. Martin forsook the way of the warrior and hung up his sword. That was when our order found its true vocation. All the mice took a solemn vow to never harm another living creature, unless it was an enemy that sought to harm our order by violence. They vowed to heal the sick, care for the injured, and give aid to the wretched and impoverished. So it was written, and so it has been through all the ages of mousekind since. Today, we are a deeply honored and highly respected society. Anywhere we go, even far beyond Mossflower, we are treated with courtesy by all creatures. Even predators will not harm a mouse who wears the habit of our order. They know he or she is one who will heal and give aid. It is an unwritten law that Redwall mice can go anywhere, through any territory, and pass unharmed. At all times we must live up to this. It is our way, our very life.
As the abbot spoke, so his voice increased in volume and solemnity. Matthias sat under his stern gaze, completely humbled. Abbot Mortimer stood and put a wrinkled old paw lightly on the small head, right between the velvety ears, now drooping with shame. Once more, the abbot's heart softened towards the little mouse.
Poor Matthias, alas for your ambitions. The day of the warrior is gone, my son. We live in peaceful times, thank heaven, and you need only think of obeying me, your abbot, and doing as you are bidden. In time, when I am long gone to my rest, you will think back to this day, and bless my memory, for then you will be a true member of Redwall. Come now, my friend, cheer up. It is the summer of the late rose. There are many, many days of warm sun ahead of us. Go back and get your basket of hazelnuts. Tonight we have a great feast to celebrate. My golden jubilee as abbot. When you've taken the nuts to the kitchen, I have a special task for you. Yes, indeed. I'll need some fine fish for the table. Get your rod and line. Tell Brother Alf that he is to take you fishing in the small boat. That's what young mice like doing, isn't it? Who knows? You may land a fine trout or some sticklebacks. Run along now, young one.
Happiness filled Matthias from tail to whiskers as he bobbed a quick bow to his superior and shuffled off. Smiling benignly, the abbot watched him go. Little rascal. He must have a word with the almoner to see if some sandals could be found that were the right fit for Matthias. Small wonder the poor mouse kept tripping up. Chapter 2. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was coming. He was big and tough, an evil rat with ragged fur and curved, jagged teeth. He wore a black eye patch. His eye had been torn out in a battle with a pike. Clooney had lost an eye. The pike had lost its life. Some said that Clooney was a Portuguese rat. Others said he came from the jungles far across the wide oceans. Nobody knew for sure. Clooney was a bilge rat, the biggest, most savage rodent that ever jumped from ship to shore. He was black, with grey and pink scars all over his huge, sleek body. From the tip of his wet nose, up past his green and yellow-slitted eye, across both his mean, tattered ears, down the length of his heavy, vermin-ridden back, to the enormous whip-like tail which had earned him his title, Clooney the Scourge. Now he rode on the back of the hay wagon with his 500 followers, a mighty army of rats, sewer rats, tavern rats, water rats, dockside rats, Clooney's army, fearing yet following him. Redtooth, his second-in-command, carried a long pole. This was Clooney's personal standard. The skull of a ferret was fixed at his top. Clooney had killed the ferret. He feared no living thing. Wild-eyed, with the terror of rat smell in its nostrils, the horse plunged ahead without any driver. Where the hay cart was taking him was of little concern to Clooney. Straight on the panicked horse galloped, past the milestone lodged in the earth at the roadside, heedless of the letters graven in the stone. Redwall Abbey, 15 miles. Clooney spat over the edge of the cart at two young rabbits playing in a field. Tasty little things. A pity the cart hadn't stopped yet, he thought. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was a god of war. Clooney was coming nearer. Chapter 3. Beneath the great hall of Redwall, candles burned bright in their sconces. This was the cavern hall of the mice. What a night it was going to be. Between them, Matthias and Brother Alf had caught and landed a fully grown grayling. They had fought and played the big fish for nearly 2 hours, finally wading into the shallows and dragging it back to the bank. It was nearly 2 pounds in weight, a tribute to Brother Alf's angling skills combined with the youthful muscles of Matthias and their joint enthusiasm. Constance the Badger had to be called. Gripping the fish in her strong jaws, she followed the two mice to the Abbey kitchen and delivered the catch for them. Then she made her farewells. They would see her at the Jubilee feast that evening, along with many other Mossflower residents who had been invited to share the festivities. Brother Alf and Matthias stood proudly beside their catch amid the culinary hustle and bustle until they were noticed by Friar Hugo. Busy as he was, the enormously fat Hugo, who would have no other title but that of Friar, stopped what he was doing. Wiping the perspiration from his brow with a dandelion that he held with his tail, he waddled about, inspecting the fish.
Nice scales, bright eyes, beautifully fresh.
Friar Hugo smiled so joyfully that his face disappeared amid deep dimples. He shook Alf by the paw and clapped Matthias heartily on the back as he called out between chuckles.
Bring the white gooseberry wine. Fetch me some rosemary, thyme, beech nuts, and honey. Quickly, and now, friends, now, he squawked,
waving the dandelion wildly with his tail.
I, Hugo, will create a grayling a la Redwall, such as will melt in the mouth of mice. Fresh cream! I need lots of fresh cream. Bring me some mint leaves, too.
They had left Friar Hugo ranting on, delirious in his joy, as they both went off to bathe and clean up, combing whiskers, curling tails, shining noses, and the 101 other grooming tasks that Redwall mice always perform in preparation for an epic feast. The rafters of Cavern Hall rang to the excited buzz and laughter of the assembled creatures. Hedgehogs, moles, squirrels, woodland creatures and mice of all kinds. Field mice, hedge mice, dormice, even a family of poor little church mice. Kindly helpers scurried about making everybody welcome. "Hello there, Mrs. Church Mouse. Sit the children down. I'll get them some raspberry cordial." "Why, Mr. Bankville, so nice to see you. How's the back? Better now? Good. Here, try a drop of this peach and elderberry brandy." Matthias's young head was in a whirl. He could not remember being so happy in all his life. Winifred the Otter nudged him. "I say, Matthias, where's this giant greyling that you and old Alf hooked? By the claw! I wish that I could land a beauty like that. Nearly a 2-pounder, wasn't it?" Matthias swelled with pride. Such praise, and from the champion fisher herself, an otter. Tim and Tess, the twin church mouse babes, felt Matthias's strong arm muscles and giggled aloud in admiration. He helped to serve them 2 portions of apple and mint ice cream. Such nice little twins. Was it only 3 months ago that he had helped Sister Stephanie to get them over tail rickets? How they had grown. Abbot Mortimer sat in his carved willow chair, beaming thanks as one by one the new arrivals laid their simple homemade gifts at his feet. An acorn cup from a squirrel, fishbone combs from the otters, mossy bark sandals made by the moles, and many more fine presents too numerous to mention. The abbot shook his head in amazement. Even more guests were arriving. He beckoned Friar Hugo to his side. A whispered conference was held. Matthias could only hear snatches of the conversation.
Don't worry, Father Abbot. There will be enough for all. How are the cellar stocks, Hugo? Enough to flood the Abbey pond, Father. Nuts? We must not run short of nuts. You name them, we've got them. Even candied chestnuts and acorn crunch. We could feed the district for a year. Dairy produce? Oh, that. I've got a cheddar cheese that 4 badgers couldn't roll, plus 10 other varieties. Oh, good. Thank you, Hugo. Oh, we must thank Alf and young Matthias for that magnificent fish. What fine anglers they are. There's enough to keep the entire abbey going for a week. Excellent mice, well done.
Matthias blushed to his tail's end. "The otters! The otters!" A loud, jolly cry went up as 3 otters in clown costumes came bounding in. Such acrobatics. They tumbled, balanced, and gyrated, cavorting comically across the laden tabletops without upsetting as much as a single sultana. They ended up hanging from the rafters by a strand of ivy, to wild applause. Ambrose Spike the Hedgehog did his party piece. He amazed everyone with his feats of legerdemain. Eggs were taken from a squirrel's ear, a young mouse's tail stood up and danced like a snake, the incredible vanishing shell trick was performed in front of a group of little harvest mice, who kept squeaking, "He's got it under his prickles." But had he? Ambrose made a few mysterious passes and produced the shell straight out of the mouth of an awestruck infant mouse. Was it magic? Of course it was. All activity ceased as the great Joseph Bell tolled out 8 o'clock from the Abbey belfry. Silently, all the creatures filed to their allotted places. They stood reverently behind the seats, with heads lowered. Abbot Mortimer rose and solemnly spread his paws wide, encompassing the festive board. He said the grace.
Fur and whisker, tooth and claw, all who enter by our door. Nuts and herbs, leaves and fruits, berries, tubers, plants and roots. Silverfish, whose life we take, only for a meal to make.
This was followed by a loud and grateful Amen. There was a mass clattering of chairs and scraping of forms as everyone was seated. Matthias found himself next to Tim and Tess on one paw, and Cornflower Field Mouse on the other. Cornflower was a quiet young mouse, but undoubtedly very pretty. She had the longest eyelashes Matthias had ever seen, the brightest eyes, the softest fur, the whitest teeth. Matthias fumbled with a piece of celery and self-consciously turned to see if the twins were coping adequately. You never could tell with these baby church mice. Brother Alpha marked that Friar Hugo had excelled himself as course after course was brought to the table. Tender freshwater shrimp garnished with cream and rose leaves, deviled barley pearls and acorn puree, apple and carrot chews, marinated cabbage stalks, steeped in creamed white turnip with nutmeg. A chorus of oohs and ahs greeted the arrival of 6 mice pushing a big trolley. It was the grayling. Reeds of aromatic stream drifted from the cavern hall. The fish had been baked to perfection. Friar Hugo entered, with a slight swagger added to his ungainly waddle. He swept off his chef's cap with his tail and announced in a somewhat pompous squeak, "My Lord Abbot, honoured guests from Mossflower area, and members of the Abbey. I wish to present my pièce de résistance." "Oh, get on with it, Hugo." After some icy staring about to detect the culprit and several smothered sniggers from around the room, the little fat friar puffed himself up once more and acclaimed firmly, "Grayling à la Redwall." Polite but eager applause rippled round as Hugo sliced the fish and placed the first steaming portion on a platter. With suitable dignity, he presented it to the abbot, who thanked him graciously. All eyes were on the Father Abbot. He took a dainty fork loaded precariously with steaming fish. Carefully, he transferred it from plate to mouth. Chewing delicately, he turned his eyes upwards, then closed them. Whiskers a-twitch, jaws working steadily. Munching away, his tail curled up holding a napkin, which neatly wiped his mouth. The abbot's eyes reopened. He beamed like the sun on midsummer morn.
Quite wonderful. Perfectly exquisite. Friar Hugo, you are truly my champion chef. Please serve our guests your masterwork.
Any further speech was drowned by hearty cheers. Chapter 4. Clooney was in a foul temper. He snarled viciously. The horse had stopped from sheer exhaustion. He hadn't wanted that. Some inner devil persuaded him that he had not reached his destination. Clooney's one eye slitted evilly. From the depths of the hay cart, the rodents of the warlord's army watched their master. They knew him well enough to stay clear of him in his present mood. He was violent, unpredictable.
"Skullface!"
Clooney snapped. There was a rustle in the hay. A villainous head popped up.
"Aye, Chief, you want with me?"
Clooney's powerful tail shot out and dragged the unfortunate forward. Skullface cringed as sharp, dirty claws dug into his fur. Clooney nodded at the horse.
"Jump on that thing's back sharpish. Give it a good bite, and I'll get the lazy brute moving again."
Skullface swallowed nervously and licked his dry lips.
"But, Chief, it might bite me back."
Swish! Crack! Clooney wielded his mighty tail as if it were a bullwhip. His victim screamed aloud with pain as the scourge lashed his thin, bony back.
"Mutiny! Insubordination!"
Clooney roared.
"By the teeth of hell, I'll flay you into mangy doll rags!"
Skullface scurried over to the driver's seat, yelling with pain.
"No more! Don't whip me, Chief! Look, I'm gonna do it!"
"Hold tight to the rigging back there!"
Clooney shouted to his horde. Skullface performed a frantic leap. He landed on the horse's back. The terrified animal did not wait for the rat to bite. As soon as it felt the loathsome scratching weight descend on its exposed haunches, it gave a loud, panicked whinny and bucked. Spurred on by the energy of fright, it careered off like a runaway juggernaut. Skullface had time for just one agonized scream before he fell. The iron-shod cartwheels rolled over him. He lay in a red mist of death, the life ebbing from his broken body. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the sneering visage of Clooney the Scourge, roaring from the jolting backboard.
"Tell the devil Clooney sent you, skullface!"
They were on the move again. Clooney was getting nearer. Chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hall, the great feast had slackened off. So had a lot of belts. Redwall mice and their guests sat back replete. There were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear.
"Friar, I want you to pack up a large sack of food. Hazelnuts, cheese, bread, cakes, anything you see fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse, as secretly as you can, without attracting attention. Poverty is an ugly spectre when a mousewife has as many mouths to feed as she does. Oh, and be sure her husband doesn't suspect what you are doing. John Churchmouse may be poor, but he is also proud. I fear he may not accept charitable gifts."
Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do his abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common. An interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mice. They had passed a pleasant evening, joking and playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered onto Matthias's lap and fallen asleep. whereupon baby Tim did likewise in the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias as she stroked Tim's small head. Bless their little paws. Don't they look so peaceful? Matthias nodded contently in agreement. Colin Vole tittered aloud and remarked rather foolishly, would you look at Matthias and Cornflower there? A nurse of those two babies like they was an old wedded couple who will crumble by a bank. Brother Alf reprimanded him sharply. Here now, you keep a latch on that silly tongue of yours, Colin Vole. Don't you know that someday Matthias will be a Redwall mouse? And don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole, I could say a thing or two to your mum and dad. Only last evening I saw you playing Catch the Burrush with that young harvest mouse. What was her name now? Colin Vole blushed until his nose went dry. He flounced off, switching his tail, muttering about going outside to take the air. Matthias caught a nod and a glance from the abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he deposited the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair and went across to him.
Matthias, my son, did you enjoy my Jubilee feast?
Yes, thank you, Father, Matthias replied.
Good,
chuckled the abbot.
Now, I was going to ask Brother Alf or Edward to go on a special errand, but they are no longer young mice, and both look quite weary at this late hour. So I thought I might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out this special task for me.
Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. Say the word, and I'm your mouse, sir. The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidently.
You see, the church mouse family, well, it's such a long way back home for them on foot. Good heavens, and there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you were to drive them home in the abbey cart, along with any others going that way. Constance Badger would pull the cart, of course, while you could act as a guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, Matthias.
The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to his full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. Leave it to me, Father Abbot. Old Constance is a bit slow-thinking. I'll take complete responsibility. The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias march off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip-flop, flip-flop. He tripped and fell flat on his tail.
Oh dear, I'll have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't so big,
the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living so close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit next to him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mum helping Mrs. Churchmouse with the little ones, while her dad chatted away with John Churchmouse as they shared a pipe of old Bracken Twist. Friar Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Churchmouse.
Abbot says thank you for the loan of bowls and tablecloths, ma'am.
The fat friar gave her a huge wink. All comfy back there? Called Matthias. Right, off we go, Constance. The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their goodnights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse. As the cart rolled out into the road, a sliver of golden moon looked down from a star-pierced summer night. Matthias gazed upwards, feeling as if he was slowly turning with the silent earth. Peace was all about him. The baby mice inside the cart whimpered fitfully in their small secret dreams. Constance ambled slowly along, as though she were out on a nighttime stroll pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the footboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear the gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Churchmouse, blending with the hum of nocturnal insects from the meadow and hedges on this balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that bloomed in the abbey gardens. Normally, it was in full red flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in dormant young rosebuds, even now, well into June, a thing that happened only infrequently, and usually held in an extra long, hot summer. Old Methuselah could only remember 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he had advised that it be marked on the calendar and in the Abbey Chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old cart rolled on gently, down the long dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouse lived, as his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly, and without warning, they were roused by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of the ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure, while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart, which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay, but these were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavy tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons: pikes, knives, spears, and long rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw, he grasped a long paw with a ferret's head spiked to it, while in the other was his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as horse and wagon clattered off down the road into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Matthias walked out onto the road, staff in hand. Stray wisps of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the abbey cart back onto the road. Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust.
Did you see that? I saw it, but I don't believe it.
What in heaven was that?
What in hell, more like?
All those rats. And such big ones, too. Aye, but that one on the back, he looked like the devil himself. Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. I think we'd best head back to the abbey, she said firmly. Father Abbot will want to know about this straight away. Knowing that the badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. Right, Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies, he said. Mr. Fieldmouse, Mr. Churchmouse, up front with Constance, please. Silently the mice did as ordered. The cart moved off with Matthias positioned on the back providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken. Chapter 6. The horse had gotten away safely. It was the hay cart that suffered the most damage. Bolting recklessly from side to side down the road, the blinkered animal failed to see the twin stone gateposts on its right. Skidding crazily, the cart smashed into the uprights. There was a loud splintering of shafts as the horse careered onwards, trailing in its wake reins, traces, and shattered timber. His lightning reflexes serving him well, Clooney leaped clear. He landed cat-like on all fours as the hay cart upended in the roadside ditch, its buckled wheels spinning awkwardly. Feeling braced after his mad ride and the subsequent narrow escape, Clooney strode to the ditch's edge. The distressed cries of those trapped beneath the cart reached his ears. He spat contemptuously, narrowing his one good eye.
Come on, get up out of there, you cringing load of cat's meat,
he bellowed.
Red Tooth, Dark Claw, report to me or I'll have your skulls for skittles.
Clooney's two hench rats pulled themselves from the ditch, shaking their heads dazedly.
Crack! Slash!
The whip-like tail brought them swiftly to his side.
Three-leg and Scratch are dead, Chief.
Dead as dirt. The cart crushed him, Chief.
Stupid fools,
snarled Clooney.
Serves them right. What about the rest?
Old Wormtail has lost a paw. Some of the others are really hurt.
Clooney sneered.
Oh, they'll get over it, and suffer worse by the time I'm done with them. They're getting too fat, sluggish. By the tripes, they'd not last 5 minutes in this storm at sea. Come on, you dead and alive ragbags. Get up here and gather round.
Rats struggled from the ditch and the cart, frantic to obey the harsh command as quickly as possible. They crowded about the undamaged gateposts, which their leader had chosen as a perch. None dared to cry or complain about their hurts. Who could predict what mood the warlord was in?
Right, cock your lugs up and listen to me,
Clooney snarled.
First, we've got to find out where we've docked. Let's take a bearing on this place.
Redtooth held up his claw.
The Church of St. Ninian, Chief. It says so on the notice board over yonder.
Well, no matter,
Clooney snapped.
It'll do as a berth until we find something better. Fangburn, cheese thief.
Here, Chief.
Scout the area, see if we can find a bit of lodging for us in this heap of rubble. Travel back to the west. I think we passed a big place on the way.
Aye, aye, Chief.
Frog blood, scum nose.
Chief?
Take 50 soldiers, see if you can round up any rats that know the lie of the land. Get big, strong rats, but bring along weasels, stoats and ferrets too. They'll do at a pinch. Mind now, don't stand for arguments. Smash their dens up so they don't have homes to worry about. If any refuse to join up, then kill them then and there. Understood?
All clear, Chief.
Rag here, mange fur. Take 20 rats and forage for supplies. The rest of you get inside the church. Red Tooth, Dark Claw, check the armour. See if there are things about that we can use as weapons. Iron spike ratings. There's usually enough of them around the churchyard. Jump to it. Clooney had arrived.
Chapter 7. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon being informed of the haycart incident, the abbot insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall creatures. Once again, Cavern Hall was packed to the doors, but this time it was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance and Matthias stood in front of the Council of Elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and muttering. Abbot Mortimer called order by ringing a small bell.
Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw tonight on the road to St. Ninian's?
As clearly as they could, the Badger and the young mouse related the incident of the rat-infested haycart. The council began questioning them.
Rats, you say, Matthias? What type of rat?
Inquired Sister Clements. Big ones, Matthias replied. Though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they had come from.
And what about you, Constance? Well, I remember my old granddad once knew a sea rat, she answered. Going by his description, I'd say that's what they looked like to me.
And how many would you say there were of these rats?
Father Abbot asked.
Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds.
Matthias?
Oh, yes, Father. I'd agree with Constance. At least 400.
Did you notice anything else about them, Constance?
Indeed I did, Father Abbot. My badger senses told me right off that these were very bad and evil rats.
The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts of nonsense! Pure speculation!
That's right, give a rat a bad name.
Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud. Constance is right! I could feel it myself! There was one huge rat with a ferret skull and a pole. I got a good look at him. It was like seeing some horrible monster. In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes.
Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat?
Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. He was much bigger than the others, Father.
What else? Think, Matthias.
I remember. He had only one eye.
Right or left?
Left, I think. Yes, it was the left, Father.
Now, can you recall anything about his tail?
I certainly can, Matthias squeaked. It must have been the longest tail of any rat alive. He held it in his claw as if it were a whip. The abbot paced up and down before turning to the assembly.
Twice in my lifetime I have heard travellers speak of this rat. He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney the Scourge.
A deathly hush fell upon the creatures in Cavern Hall. Clooney the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend, a warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. Go to sleep or Clooney will get you. Eat up your dinner or Clooney will come. Come in this instant or I'll tell Clooney. Most creatures didn't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of bogey that lived in bad dreams and the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by scornful snorts and derisive laughter. Furry elbows nudged downy ribs. Mice were beginning to smile from sheer relief. Clooney the Scourge, indeed. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constance looked pleadingly towards the abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence.
Mice of Redwall! I see that there are those among you who doubt the word of your abbot.
The quiet but authoritative words caused an embarrassed shuffling from the Council of Elders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat.
Good Father Abbot. We all respect your word and look to you for guidance. But really, I mean...
Sister Clement stood up smiling. She spread her paws wide.
Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late.
A roar of laughter greeted the ironic words. Constance's back hairs bristled. She gave an angry growl, followed by a fierce bark. The mice huddled together with fright. Nobody had ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. Before they could recover, Constance was up on her hind legs having her say.
I've never seen such a pack of empty-headed ninnies. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, giggling like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the Elders of Redwall act acting in this way?" Constance hunched over her heavy shoulders and glared about with a ferocity that set them trembling. "Now, you listen to me. Take heed of what your father Abbot has to say. The next creature who utters one squeak will answer to me. Understand?" The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive blunt paw. "The floor is yours, Father Abbot."
"Thank you, Constance, my good and faithful friend,"
the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely.
"I have little more to say on the subject, but I see that you still need convincing. Here is my proposal. We will send 2 mice out to relieve the gatehouse. Let me see. Yes, brothers Rufus and George. Would you kindly go and take over from Brother Methuselah? Send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveller's Record volumes. Not the present issue, but the old editions, which were used in past years."
Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high-slitted window, Matthias could see the rosy pink and gold fingers of dawn stealing down Cavern Hall as the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs. All in the space of a night, events had moved from festivity to a crisis, and he, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First the big grayling, then the sighting of the cart. Large happenings for a small mouse. Old Brother Methuselah had kept the Abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Besides the official chronicle of Redwall, he also kept his own personal volume, full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, and garrulous hares. They all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse who lived with the company of his volumes in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-bark case, carefully perching them on the bridge of his nose. All gathered round to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeak barely above a whisper.
"My Lord Abbot Cedric. It is Cedric, isn't it? Oh, botheration. He'll be the new abbot. Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh, dear me. I see so many of them come and go, you know. My Lord Abbot, Mortimer, and members of Redwall. I refer to a record of winter 6 years back."
Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages.
Ah, yes, here it is. Late in November. Year of the small, sweet chestnut. From a frozen sparrowhawk, come down from the far north. Peculiar chap, spoke with a strange accent, and repaired his right-wing pin feather. News of a mine disaster, caused by a large savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and other creatures who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night, and with his band of rats gnawed away and undermined much of the wooden shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners.
Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly.
I have no need to read further. I can recite other misdeeds from memory. As the hordes of Clooney the Scourge have moved southwards over the past 6 years, I have gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight later that same year. Piglets, an entire litter of them eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread through livestock herds by Clooney's army. There was even a report brought to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and much destruction.
Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles.
And you dare doubt the word of our abbot that Clooney the Scourge exists? What idiotic mice you are, to be sure.
Methuselah's words caused widespread consternation. There was much agitated nibbling of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise when even the most elderly among them was a blind, hairless mite, pulling and whimpering for a feed from its mother.
Oh, my whiskers, what a mess. Hadn't we better pack up and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us. Oh dear, what shall we do?
Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that surprised even him.
Do?
He cried. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not help shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths.
"Why, thank you, Matthias," he said. "I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we'll do. We'll be ready.
Chapter 8. Clooney the Scourge was having nightmares. He had lain down in the church mouse's bed for a well-earned rest, while his army was going about its allotted tasks. He should never have tried to sleep on an empty stomach, but weariness overcame his hunger. In Clooney's dream, everything was shrouded in a red mist. The cries of his victims rang out as barns blazed and ships foundered on a stormy red sea. Cattle bellowed in pain as he battled with the pike that had taken his eye. The warlord thrashed about, killing, conquering, and laying waste to all in his dream. Then the phantom figure appeared. At first it seemed a small thing, a mouse, in fact, dressed in a long hooded robe. Clooney did not relish meeting with it. He could not tell why, but the mouse kept getting closer to him. For the first time in his life, he turned and ran. Clooney went like a bat out of hell. Glancing back, he saw all the carnage, death, and misery he had caused in his career. The big rat laughed insanely and ran faster, on and on, past scenes of desolation and destruction wreaked by him, Clooney the Scourge. Floating through the red mists, he could still see the strange mouse hard on his heels. Clooney felt himself filled with hatred for his pursuer. It seemed to have grown larger. Its eyes were cold and grim. Deep inside, Clooney knew that even he could not frighten this oddly garbed mouse. Now it was wielding a large, bright sword, an ancient weapon of terrible beauty. The battle-scarred blade had a word written upon it that he could not make out. Sweat dripped from Clooney's claws like stinging acid. He stumbled. The strange figure was closer. It had grown into a giant. Clooney's lungs felt as if they were bursting. He realized that he had slowed up and the mouse was getting closer. He tried to put on an extra burst of speed, but his legs would not obey. They ran more and more slowly, more and more heavily. Clooney cursed aloud at his leaden limbs. He saw he was trapped in deep, icy mud. For the first time, he knew the meaning of mindless fear and panic. He turned slowly, too late. The enemy was upon him. He was rooted helpless to the spot. The avenging mouse swung the sword up high. A million lights flashed from its deadly blade as it struck. Bong! The loud toll of the distant Joseph bell brought Clooney whirling back from the realms of nightmare to cold reality. He shivered, wiping the sweat from his fur with a shaky claw. Saved by the bell. He was puzzled. What did the fearful dream mean? Clooney had never been one to put his faith in omens. But this dream, it had been so lifelike and vivid that he shuddered. A timid paw tapping on the door snapped Clooney from his reverie with a start. It was Ragear and Mangefur, his scavengers. They slunk into the room, each trying to hide behind the other, knowing that the poor results of their search were likely to incur the chief's wrath. Their assumption was correct. Clooney's baleful eye watched them as his long, flexible tail sorted through the paltry offerings which had dropped from their claws. A few dead beetles, 2 large earthworms, some unidentifiable vegetation, and the pitiful carcass of a long-dead sparrow. Clooney smiled at Ragear and Mangefur. With a sigh of relief, they grinned back at him. The chief was in a good mood. At lightning speed, the big rat's claws shot out and grabbed them both cruelly by the ears. The stupid henchratch yowled piteously as they were lifted bodily from the floor and swung to and fro. In a fit of rage, Clooney bashed their heads together. Half senseless, they were hurled towards the doorway, with his angry words ringing in their skulls.
Beetles, worms, rotten sparrows, get me meat! Tender, young, red meat! Next time you bring me rubbish like this, I'll spit the pair of you and have you roasted in your own juice! Is that clear?
Mangefur pointed an accusing claw at his companion.
Please, Chief, it was Ragear's fault. If we'd have gone across the fields instead of up the road...
Don't believe that big fat liar, Chief. It was him who suggested going up the road, not me.
Get out!
The scavengers dashed off, bumping clumsily into each other with panic as they tried to get through the door together. Clooney slumped back on the bed and snorted impatiently. Frogblood and Scumnose were the next to report. They bore news that cheered Clooney up somewhat. They'd obtained over 100 new recruits, mainly rats, but with a good scattering of ferrets and weasels, and the odd stoat. There had been some who needed convincing. These had been press-ganged by the savage beating from Frogblood, coupled with the threat of a horrible death. They were soon convinced that the wisest course was to enlist in Clooney's horde. Others were hungry nomads, only too willing to join up with the infamous Clooney. They were greedy for plunder and booty, and pleased to be on what they were sure would be the winning side. Lined up in the churchyard, the recruits were supplied with weaponry by Redtooth and Darkclaw. Impassively, they stood in ranks awaiting the warlord's inspection. Clooney nodded his approval. Scurvy rats, hungry ferrets, sly weasels, bad stoats. Exactly what he needed.
Read him the articles, Redtooth,
he snapped. Redtooth swaggered back and forth on the churchyard paving as he recited the formula from memory.
Right. Eyes front. You're in the service of Clooney the Scourge now, me buckos. Desert, and you'll be killed. Retreat, and you're under sentence of death. Disobey, and you'll die. I'm Redtooth, Clooney's #1 rat. You will obey the word of your captains. They take orders from me. I take orders from Clooney. Remember that. Now, if anyone, two, or a group, or even all of you together want to try and beat Clooney and lead the horde, this is your chance.
Without warning, Clooney charged headlong into the new recruits, lashing out wildly with his scourging tail. He bowled them left, right, and center with his massive strength, baring his teeth and slitting his eye. He whipped fiercely away until they fell back and scattered in disorder, hiding behind gravestones. Clooney threw back his head and roared with laughter.
No guts, eh? It's just as well. I don't want dead ends on my claws before I find a proper battle for you to fight. And make no mistake, when the right time comes, I'll see you fight. Aye, and die too. Now, raise your weapons and let's see if you know who your master is.
The motley collection of evil-looking implements was framed by cloudless sky, as wild cries rang out from the newly inducted recruits.
Clooney! Clooney! Clooney the Scourge!
Chapter 9. Abbot Mortimer and Constance the Badger meandered through the grounds together. Both creatures were deep in thought. Had they spoken and voiced their thoughts, they would have mentioned the same subject, the safety of Redwall. Down long ages, the beautiful old abbey had stood for happiness, peace, and refuge to all. Diligent mice tended the neat little vegetable patches, which every season gave forth an abundance of fresh produce: cabbages, sprouts, marrows, turnips, peas, carrots, tomatoes, lettuces, and onions, all in their turn. Flower beds, heady and fragrant, with countless varieties of summer blooms, from rose to humble daisy, were planted by the mice and husbanded by the hard-working bee folk, who in their turn rewarded Redwall with plentiful supplies of honey and beeswax. The two friends wandered onwards past the pond. Early morning sunlight glinted off the water, throwing out ripples from the fish caught by the overnight lines, which were baited and left adrift each evening by Brother Alf. Ahead of them lay the berry hedges, raspberry, blackberry, bilberry, and the strawberry patch where every August, sleepy baby creatures could be seen, their stomachs full after eating the pick of the crop. Gradually they made their way around the big old chestnut trees into the orchard. This was the abbot's favorite spot. Many a leisurely nap had he taken on sunny afternoons, with the aroma of ripening fruit hovering in his whiskers. Apples, pears, quince, plums, damsons, even a vine of wild grape on the warm red stone of a south-facing wall. Old Mother Nature's blessing lay upon a haven of warm friendliness. Now, with the threat of Clooney upon Redwall, the two old friends assessed the beauteous bounty of their lifelong abode. Sweet bird song on the still air tinged Constance's heart with sorrow and regret that this peaceful existence would soon pass. Gruffly, she snuffled deep in her throat, blinking off a threatening teardrop. The abbot sensed his companion's distress. He patted the badger's rough coat with a gentle paw.
There, old girl. Don't fret. Many times in our history has tragedy been forestalled by miraculous happenings.
Constance grunted in agreement, not wishing to disillusion her trusting old friend. Deep within her, she knew a dark shadow was casting itself over the abbey. Furthermore, it was happening in the present, not in bygone days of fabled deeds. Matthias seated himself to an early breakfast in Cavern Hall. Nut bread, apples, and a bowl of fresh goat's milk. Cornflower, along with other woodland creatures granted sanctuary, was sleeping in makeshift quarters provided by the good mice of Redwall. Matthias felt that he had grown up overnight. Duty was a mantle that he had taken willingly upon his shoulders. If there were a threat to Redwall from outside, it must be dealt with. The mice of Redwall were peaceful creatures, but that must not be taken as a sign of weakness. Stolidly he munched away as he confronted the problem.
Eat heartily, Matthias. No point in facing trouble on an empty stomach. Feed the body. Nourish the mind.
The young mouse was surprised to see that old brother Methuselah had been watching him, his eyes twinkling behind the curious spectacles he invariably wore. The ancient mouse sat down at the breakfast table with a small groan.
Don't look so surprised, young one. Your face is an open book to one of my years.
Matthias drained the last of the milk from his bowl, wiping cream from his whiskers with the back of a paw. "Give me your advice, brother Methuselah," he said. "What would you do?" The old mouse wrinkled his nose.
Exactly the same thing as you would. That is, if I were younger and not so old and stiff."
Matthias felt he had found an ally. "You mean you would fight?" Methuselah rapped the table with a bony paw.
"Of course I would. It's the only sensible course to take."
He paused and stared at Matthias in an odd manner.
There's something about you, young fella. Did you ever hear the story of how Martin the warrior first came to Redwall?"
Matthias leaned forward eagerly. "Martin, tell me, brother. I love hearing about the warrior monk." Methuselah's voice dropped to a secretive whisper.
"It is written in the Great Chronicle of Redwall that Martin was very young to be such a warrior. He could have been the same age as yourself, Matthias, but like you, he was impulsive and had a great quality of youthful innocence about him when he first came to our abbey. But it is also written that in times of trouble, Martin had the gift of a natural leader, a command over others far superior to him in age and experience. The Chronicle says that they look to Martin as some look to a strong father."
Matthias was full of wonderment, but he could not help feeling puzzled. "Why do you tell this all to me, brother Methuselah?" The old mouse stood up. He stared hard at Matthias for a moment, then, turning, he shuffled slowly off. As he went, he called back over his shoulder.
"Because, Matthias, because he was very like you."
Before the young mouse could question the old one further, the Joseph bell tolled out a warning. Sandals flapping, Matthias dashed out into the grounds, nearly colliding with the abbot and Constance, who, like everyone else, were heading for the gatehouse. Brothers Rufus and George had an incident to report. A large, evil-looking rat, covered in tattoos and carrying a rusty cutlass, had turned up at the gate. He had tried to gain entry by pretending he was injured. Limping about, the rat explained that he had been in a hay cart that overturned into the ditch. Would they come with him and render assistance to his friends, many of whom were lying trapped beneath the cart, crying out for help? Brother Rufus was no fool. "How many rats were travelling in the cart together?" he asked.
"Oh, a couple of 100,
came the glib reply. Then why, reasoned Brother Rufus, did the rats not give aid to their own companions? Surely all 200 were not trapped. The rat evaded the question and made a great show of rubbing his injured leg. Could they not take him in and dress his wound and perhaps give him a bite to eat at least? Brother George agreed, on condition that the rat surrender his weapon. The rat made as if to do so, then suddenly lunged at Brother George, only to be sent sprawling by a blow from Brother Rufus's staff. Realizing that he was up against two big, competent mice who would stand no nonsense, he became abusive and bad-mouthed.
"Ha! Just you wait, mice," he raged. "There's a whole army of us camped down in the church. Would I tell Clooney how you've treated me? Oh, just wait, that's all. We'll be back, by the fang we will."
With that, he slunk off, cursing all mice. The grim news was digested in silence by the assembled creatures. Mrs. Churchmouse began sobbing.
"Oh, dearie me. Did you hear that, my dear? They must be living in our home at St. Ninian's Church. Oh, whatever shall we do? Our dear little home full of dreadful rats."
Mr. John Churchmouse tried to comfort his wife as best he could.
There, hush now, missus. Better to lose our house than lose our lives. Good job we got sanctuary here at Redwall."
"But what about the other creatures in the area?" cried Matthias. "Sensible mouse," said Constance. "Is Ambrose Spike anywhere about? He'd better do the rounds and tell them to take sanctuary here at the Abbey as quickly as possible. Spike will come to no harm. Once he curls up, there's nothing that can touch him." His idea was greeted with enthusiasm. Brother Alf went off to find the hedgehog. The abbot suggested they all go inside the abbey and await further developments. Matthias piped up again. "We'd best mount a guard on the walls." One of the older mice, Sister Clements, chided Matthias as an upstart. Her voice was stern and condescending.
"Novice Matthias, you will be silent and do as your abbot commands."
Much to everyone's surprise, the abbot came to Matthias's defense.
"One moment, Clements. Matthias speaks sense. Let us hear what he has to say. We are none of us too old to learn."
All eyes were turned on the young mouse as Matthias heard himself boldly outline his plans for the defense of Redwall. It was 11 o'clock on that glorious June morning. Mossflower Wood and the meadowlands stirred to the brazen voice of the great Joseph Bell. John Churchmouse heaved on the bell rope, as he had been told to by Constance and Matthias. Bong, boom, bong, boom. Even the small creatures in the wood and field, who could understand no language save their own, knew what it meant. Time of danger, place of sanctuary. Carrying what simple belongings they needed, woodlanders and their families hurried from far and near to gain the safety of the abbey before the storm of Cluny broke upon them. Squirrels, mice, voles, moles, otters, all save the birds of the air, who were safe anyway. Up the long dusty road they came, mothers protectively herding young ones, while fathers provided a rearguard. Brother Methuselah stood at the gate with the abbot. He translated fully to each group of creatures the abbot's message, in turn construing back to the father abbot their grateful thanks, with pledges of help and loyalty to Redwall Abbey. For what creature had not been freely given the aid and special knowledge of the kindly mice? All knew that they owed their very existence to the abbot and his community. Healing, aid, food, shelter, and good advice were granted to all. Now was the time to unite and repay, to give any help that was possible. Before much longer, Redwall would require the skills and knowledge of all its woodland allies. They would be gratefully given. Matthias and Constance stood on top of the high perimeter walls, watching the road. It was noon, and the sun shone directly overhead. Despite the heat, Matthias had ordered all the mice to put on their hoods. It served a double purpose, to shield their eyes from the sun and create a camouflage effect. Silently, each one stood, armed with a stout staff. The high red sandstone walls were far too lofty to be scaled by any normal creature. Instinctively, Matthias knew this was a good defense and a formidable deterrent. Constance could feel her hackles beginning to prickle. She sniffed the air and shivered, despite the heat that shimmered in waves across the meadowlands. The big badger nudged Matthias. "Listen to that." Matthias pricked up his ears and looked at her, questioning. "Even the birds have stopped singing," Constance said quietly. The young mouse gripped his staff tighter. "Yes, it's the silence we hear. The grasshoppers have gone quiet." Constance peered down the road as she spoke. "Strange for a summer day, little friend." Bong! Every creature standing on the ramparts twitched with fright as the loud voice of the Joseph Bell rang out, and John Churchmouse shouted from his position high in the belfry. "They're coming! Down the road! I can see them! I can see them!" Chapter 10. Cluny's army halted at the sound of the Joseph Bell. As the dust settled, Fangburn looked to his leader for approval.
They're ringing that bell again, Chief. Maybe they'll think it'll frighten us off.
The warlord's eye rested balefully on his scout.
Shut your mouth, fool. If you'd have done as I ordered and come back to report the way Cheese Thief did, we might have been inside that abbey by now.
Fangburn slunk back into the ranks. He hoped Cluny had forgotten, but Cluny rarely forgot anything on a campaign. The element of surprise had been lost. Now he must try another ploy, the show of force. The mere sight of a fully armed horde had worked before, and he had little doubt it would prove effective now. Ordinary, peaceful creatures were usually panic-stricken at the sight of Cluny the Scourge at the head of his army. The rat was a cunning general, except the times when his mad rage took control of him. But what need of berserk fits for a bunch of silly mice? Cluny knew the value of fear as a weapon, and Cluny was a fearsome figure. His long, ragged black cloak was made of bat wings, fastened at the throat with a mole skull. The immense war helmet he wore had the plumes of a blackbird, and the horns of a stag beetle adorning it. From beneath the slanted visor, his one eye glared viciously out at the abbey before him. Matthias's voice rang out sharp and clear from the high parapet. "Halt! Who goes there?" Redtooth swaggered forward and took up the challenge in his chief's name, as he called back up the walls.
Look well, all creatures. This is the mighty horde of Cluny the Scourge. My name is Redtooth. I speak for Cluny, our leader.
Constance's reply was harsh and unafraid.
"Then speak your peace and be gone, rats."
Silence hung upon the air, while Redtooth and Cluny held a whispered conference. Redtooth returned to the walls.
Cluny the Scourge says he will not deal with badgers. He will only speak with the leaders of the mice. Let us in, so that my chief may sit and talk to your chief.
Redtooth dodged back as his request was greeted by howls of derision and some loose pieces of masonry from the ramparts. These plump little mice were not as peaceful as they first looked. The rats looked to Cluny, but he was eyeing the abbot, who had joined Constance and Matthias. They appeared to be consulting quietly. Cluny watched tensely. There seemed to be some disagreement between the old mouse and his two advisors. They conferred a while. Then Matthias came forward to the parapet. He pointed at Cluny and Redtooth with his staff.
"You there, and you also. My abbot will talk with you both. The rest must remain outside."
A rumble of protest from the horde was silenced by a crack from Cluny's tail. He lifted his visor.
"We agree, Mouse. Let us in."
But what about hostages for safe conduct?
Hissed Redtooth. Clooney spat contemptuously.
Don't talk fool's talk. Do you imagine a load of mice in funny robes could take me captive?
Redtooth gnawed anxiously on a split claw.
Maybe not, Chief, but have you cast a weather eye over that badger?
Clooney answered quietly out the side of his mouth.
Don't worry. I've been watching her. Real big country bumpkin. No, these are mice of honor. They sooner die than break their word to anyone. You leave this to me.
As Clooney and Redtooth made for the gatehouse door, Constance shouted, "Put down your weapons, rats! Throw off your armor and show us that you come in peace!" Redtooth spluttered angrily.
Hell's teeth! Who does that one think she's ordering around?
Clooney shot him a warning glance.
Quiet. Do as she says.
Both rats took off their armor and placed it in a pile on the road. Matthias cried down to Clooney, "If you really are Clooney the Scourge, then we know of your tale. It is a weapon. Therefore you will knot it tightly around your waist, so that it cannot be used." Clooney laughed mirthlessly. He squinted at Matthias and cracked his tail dramatically.
Young mouse, he called. You do right to ask this thing, for truly you are looking at Clooney the Scourge.
Having said this, he took his tail in his claws and pulled the poison warspike from its tip, tossing it on the armor pile. Clooney hitched his tail in a knot around his middle.
Now will you let us in, mice? You can see we are unarmed.
Ponderously, the heavy gate inched open. The two rats passed through a bristling forest of staves. The gate slammed shut behind them. Clooney mentally estimated the walls to be of immense thickness as he and Redtooth, ducking their heads, emerged from the tunnel-like arch into the abbey grounds, where Constance and Matthias were waiting in the sunlight. The defenders followed the two rats closely, menacing them with staves. Matthias rapped out a curt command. "Leave us, mice. Go back to your duties on the wall." Unhappy at leaving the abbot unguarded, the mice hesitated to obey the order to withdraw. Clooney addressed Matthias scornfully.
Here, mouse, watch me shift them.
Suddenly he whirled upon the apprehensive creatures. The single eye rolled madly in its socket as Clooney bared claws and fangs, snarling.
Ha ha! I've got a powerful hunger for mice. You'd best get aloft on those walls. Ha ha!
Clooney leaped into the air. The mice scattered in panic. Constance stopped the proceedings with a loud, angry bark. "Here now, enough of that, rat. You are here to talk with the abbot. Get along with you." Matthias was glad he was walking behind the rats. He blushed with shame. Clooney had sent the defenders scattering like butterflies in a whirlwind. Matthias was furious. The enemy now knew he was dealing with untrained and untested soldiers. As the party walked towards Cavern Hall, Clooney could sense hostility emanating from the young mouse, who flip-flopped behind him in overlarge sandals. Strange for one so young to be counted as a captain, he thought. Moreover, the little fellow didn't seem to fear him. But enough of that. Clooney would deal with him when the time came. Meanwhile, the big rat gazed about his surroundings in secret admiration. What an astounding place. He allowed himself a peek at the future. One day, this would be called Clooney's Castle. He liked the sound of that. Secure from attack, living off the fat of the land. In his mind's eye, he could see it all. Those mice and the woodland creatures enslaved, living just to serve him. He would hold sway as far as the eye could see. Power, an end to his rovings, a dream come true. King Clooney. Entering the abbey, the party stopped to make way for a pretty little field mouse bearing a tray. "Oh, Matthias," she said, "I've brought some refreshments for you, and—" "Thank you, Cornflower. Put them down on the table," said Matthias abruptly. Redtooth nudged Clooney.
Cornflower, eh? Satan's knows she's a pretty little one for you.
Clooney remained silent. He stood insolently, watching Cornflower set the table in Cavern Hall. A pretty one indeed. The abbot indicated chairs. They all sat except Clooney, who lounged against the table using the chair as a footstool. He glared at Redtooth until he stood and waited alongside his chief. Idly, Clooney picked up a bowl and honeyed milk and sampled it. Slop. He spat it out onto the floor. The abbot folded his paws into the wide sleeves of his habit and stared impassively at the warlord.
"What do you want at Redwall Abbey, my son?"
Clooney kicked the chair over and laughed madly. As the echoes died around the room, his face went grim.
Your son? Ha! That's a good one. I'll tell you what I want, mouse. I want it all. The lot. Everything. You hear me?
Matthias's chair clattered on its side as he sprang forward, breaking free from the restraining paws of the abbot. "Listen, rat, you don't scare me. I'll give you our answer. You get nothing. Now do you understand that?" Shaking with fury, Matthias allowed himself to be pulled back onto the chair. The abbot turned to Clooney.
"You must forgive Matthias. He is young and headstrong. Now, as to your proposal, I'm afraid it is out of the question. Should you or your army require medical attention, food, clothing, or help upon your way, you will find us only too willing to assist.
Clooney interrupted rudely by pounding upon the table until the abbot was silenced. He pointed a claw at Redtooth.
Read them the articles.
Redtooth held up a tattered parchment. He cleared his throat.
These are the articles of surrender to be obeyed by all creatures who come under the claw of Clooney the Scourge or any of his commanders. 1. Surrender will be total and unconditional. 2. Clooney will execute the leaders of all who choose to oppose him. 3. All property conquered will belong solely to Clooney the Scourge. This includes homes, food, crops, land, and additionally all creatures dwelling on said property. They shall be owned by Clooney. Thwack!
Redtooth got no further. Unable to contain himself, Matthias sent his staff ripping through the middle of the articles. As the torn document fluttered to the floor, Redtooth launched himself at Matthias with a snarl. The rat was actually in midair when a huge blunt paw knocked him flat. He lay stunned with Constance standing over him.
Why pick on a small mouse? Surely a big strong rat like you can deal with an old badger. Come on, try me for size.
It was only the timely intervention of Abbot Mortimer that saved Redtooth's life.
Constance, would you please let the rat up? Much as I would like to see him get his just desserts, you must remember, we cannot break the law of hospitality in our abbey.
Redtooth staggered shakily to his feet, backing warily away from the badger. Clooney spoke as if nothing had occurred.
You, Abbot Mouse, you have until tomorrow evening to give me your answer.
Not normally given to anger, the abbot stared Clooney in the eye, his face a mask of cold fury.
I will not need until tomorrow, rat. You can have my answer now. How dare you come here with your rubber band to read articles of death and slavery to me? I tell you that neither you nor your army will ever set paw or claw inside Redwall. Not while I or any of my creatures have breath in our bodies to fight and resist you. That is my solemn word.
Clooney sneered and turned on his heel. Followed by Redtooth, he stamped out. On the stairs between Cavern Hall and Great Hall, he stopped and turned, his cold voice echoing between both chambers.
And die, all of you, every male, female, and young one. You have refused my terms. Now you'll suffer the punishment of Clooney. You will beg on your knees for death to come swiftly, but I shall make your torment loud and long before you die.
It was then that Constance did something that creatures would speak of in years to come. Exerting the full strength of a female badger, she lifted the massive Cavern Hall dining table. It was a huge, solid oaken thing that no dozen mice could even move. Dishes clattered and food spilled as Constance heaved the table above her head. Her voice was a roar.
Get out, rats! Leave this abbey! I'm weary of your voices. Hurry before I break the laws of hospitality and ask the abbot pardon later. Go! While you still have skulls!
With the best grace he could muster, Clooney walked rather quickly up the stairs, followed by Redtooth, who laughed nervously.
Big country bumpkin, eh, Chief? One more word from you back there and she'd have thrown that table and crushed us.
Remembering who it was that he had spoken to in this insolent fashion, Redtooth cringed, expecting Clooney to deal him a blow for impudence. But nothing happened. Clooney was standing transfixed, oblivious to all about him, even Matthias and the abbot who had followed him out. Clooney stood staring at the tapestry.
Who is this mouse?
He gasped. Matthias followed the direction of the rat's gaze. He walked to the tapestry with his paw outstretched. Do you mean this mouse? Clooney nodded dumbly. Matthias, still with his paw outstretched, declared proudly. This is Martin the warrior. He founded our order. And I'll tell you something else, rat. Martin was the bravest mouse that ever lived. If he were here today, he'd take up his big sword and send you and all your bullies packing. Those of you he didn't chop up into crow meat. Much to everyone's surprise, Clooney allowed himself to be shown out. He was like one in a daze, all the way back to the gatehouse. A hush fell over the mice on guard as Clooney and Redtooth were led out onto the road. Swiftly, the horde gathered around the warlord and his lieutenant. They awaited orders. Deputizing for Clooney, Redtooth called out,
Form up! Back to the church, everyone!
Clooney marched automatically, shaking his head in disbelief. Martin the warrior, the mouse who pursued him through his nightmares. What did it mean? As Redtooth marched away, a voice hailed him from the wall. He turned and looked upwards. The torn articles, the parchment wrapped around a fistful of rotting vegetables, splattered in his face. Livid with rage, he clawed the foul mess from his eyes and saw Constance leaning over the parapet with a wicked grin of delight on her striped muzzle. The badger shouted mockingly,
Don't forget to call again, rat. I'd be delighted to see you. We've got some unfinished business that I'm looking forward to settling. Just you and me, Redtooth.
Before the rat could reply, she had vanished from sight. Chapter 11. Later that evening,
Brother Alf was patrolling his stretch of the wall when he noticed a movement in the ferns at the edge of Mossflower Wood. Constance and Matthias were summoned hastily. They peered over the parapet. Brother Alf pointed to where he had seen the ferns moving.
Over there, to the right of that aspen. Look, they're moving again.
Matthias had better nocturnal vision than either of his friends. He was the first to recognize the forlorn figure that rolled under the grass.
It's Ambrose Spike. He's hurt. Quick, let's get down there.
Hold fast,
Constance warned.
it may be a trap.
Matthias was loath to hang about while a creature was lying injured within his sight, but he had to heed his friend's advice. There just might be some of Clooney's rats lying in ambush for any creature that ventured into the shadowy fringes of Mossflower. However, Matthias was growing impatient.
We can't leave poor Ambrose lying out there, Constance. He'll die. We've got to do something.
The badger sat down with her snout between her paws.
Yes, we've got to think. Anyone got an idea?
The two mice joined her. Hardly had Matthias sat down when he leaped up again.
I've got it. Stay here. I'll be back in a tick.
Brother Alf watched the little figure flip-flopping off. He gave a sigh and shook his head.
What do you suppose our Matthias is up to?
The badger smiled affectionately. More and more she was coming to trust Matthias's natural skill as a leader and tactician.
Don't fret, Brother Alf. Whatever it is, you can bet your habit it'll be an original Matthias gem. That young mouse has got more in his head than a pile of acorns.
Brother Alf looked out at the still form in the grass.
It may be too late. Ambrose isn't even twitching. Look, he's not rolled up into a ball anymore.
Further speculation was curtailed by the appearance of Matthias. With him were half a dozen moles. Their leader glanced out at the hedgehog. He scratched some hastily calculations on the wall with his claw, then turned to Matthias.
Oi, I think we could get you an edge, big buck, sir. You get us out in the gate and stand the watch.
Turning to his team, the foremole, for that was his official title, began discussing tunnel width, coupled with reverse pickle drag, forward traction, and all the other specialist details that are routine to the average qualified tunnel mole. Matthias whispered to Constance and Brother Alf.
Formol and his crew are first class at rescue work. They've often rescued burrowers from cave-ins. All we have to do is stand guard by the southeast wicket gate until they're safely back. Right. What are we waiting for? Let's go.
Silently they slid outside the small green-painted iron door. Matthias straining his eyes anxiously to see if there were any signs of life in the hedgehog. He still lay about 150 mouse paces from where they stood. The moles unraveled a rope sling. 4 moles stood watching as 2 of his team started the dig. Matthias looked on in wonderment. 1 minute they were above ground. A moment later there was a veritable shower of loam and topsoil as they vanished beneath the earth. Nature's own technicians. In a trice they were back, moist snouts poking from the excavation. They made their ground report to Formol.
Had we him be nice and soft, sir. Bent no rock nor root to stop us uns. Straight for our way, me thinking.
Satisfied, Formol moved towards the test hole with the rest of his team.
We'll dig ahead. You widen workins, Gaffer and Marge. Follow up assurin'.
He tugged his snout respectfully to Matthias and Constance.
You, gentle beast, bide by ear till us back.
Another quick shower of soft dark earth, and the moles were lost to view beneath the ground surface. Constance sniffed the breeze as Matthias turned his ears to the nighttime woodland sounds. They watched the ground humping into a continuous hillock that progressed farther as the moles tunneled towards Ambrose Spike. The night remained calm and still, but Matthias and Constance stayed alert, both knowing if they failed to observe this rudimentary law of nature, the penalty could be fatal. Matthias did a little shuffle of excitement.
Look, they've come up right under poor old Ambrose. My word, what splendid moles. Good heavens, he's vanished completely. They must have him inside the tunnel.
In a surprisingly short time, the tunnelers were back. Emerging from the hole, they carried the hedgehog in the rope sling across their backs. Refusing any help from the badger or the mouse, Formo merely tugged his snout.
Nay, you uns only get your paws dirted.
As swiftly as possible, Ambrose was hurried to the Abbey infirmary and sickbay. He was attended by the abbot himself. A hasty diagnosis revealed that the hedgehog was suffering from a long, jagged wound that ran from the back of his ear to the tip of his paw. Brother Alf nodded sympathetically.
That's probably what caused old Ambrose to pass out. Pain and loss of blood. He must have travelled a fair way in that condition. Do you think he'll live, Father Abbot?
The abbot chuckled quietly. He cleaned the long, ugly wound and applied a poultice of herbs.
No cause for alarm, Brother Alf. Ambrose Spike is made of leather and needles. Tough as a boulder, this old ruffian is. Look, he's beginning to come around already.
Sure enough, after some peculiar grunts and much curling and uncurling, the hedgehog opened his eyes and looked about.
Oh, my aching ear. Father Abbot, you wouldn't see a poor son of the Spike suffering like this without a drop of last October's nut brown ale to wet his parched gullet, he pleaded.
All the creatures laughed aloud with delight and relief at seeing their old friend alive and well once again. Matthias was astonished at the amount of nut-brown ale that Ambrose supped before he deemed himself fit enough to make a report. The hedgehog smacked his lips noisily.
Ah, that's better. Now let me see. I did as you asked me. It gave as many creatures fair warning as I could. The Joseph Bell helped a great deal to warn everyone. Well, to cut a long story short, it must have been near noon when I stopped at Volbank. I told the Vols the bad news, and blow me if that little ninny Colin Vol didn't go streaking and screaming all over the place as to how they'd all be murdered in their beds. Believe me, there was no way of silencing that daft young thing. Anyhow, his noise must have alerted a pack of those rats who were out foraging. Before you could say knife, they were upon us. There was such a gang of them that I couldn't do anything. I had to curl up. They carried off young Colin and his mum and dad, but try as they would, there was no laying claws on Ambrose Spike. No, sir. Then one of them had a go at me with the point of an iron churchyard railing. Stabbed away at me, the devil did. They reckoned I was dead. Said I was too spiky to eat, so they dragged the Vol family off, and I lay still until the coast was clear. I made it as far as Mossflower, and that's all I can remember. Is there any more left in that jug? This wound's giving me jip. I need ale for medicinal purposes, Father Abbot.
Matthias groaned and hung his head in despair. The Vol family taken captive. Death or slavery was all the wretched creatures could look forward to. Emboldened by the rescue of the hedgehog, Matthias was about to suggest that he and Constance, together with some hand-picked helpers, venture to undertake a rescue mission to St. Ninian's Church. It was as if the abbot and Constance both read his thoughts at the same time. Abbot Mortimer sighed and shook his head at Matthias. The badger was more voluble. Matthias, forget it. Abandon any hopes you have of snatching the Vol family from under Clooney's nose. Imagine it, a few of us going up against several hundred armed rats in their own camp. Ridiculous. A fat lot of good we'd be as defenders of Redwall, with our heads fixed to Clooney's standard. Matthias, you're a very brave young mouse, so please try to set an example to the rest, but not becoming a foolish or dead one. On reflection, Matthias could see the wisdom of the badger's counsel. Long after they had all retired for the night, he sat up thinking. 100 mad ideas pounded through his brain, each one wilder than the last. Feeling at a loss, he wandered up into Great Hall and stood in front of the tapestry. Without consciously realizing it, he found himself talking to Martin the warrior. Oh, Martin, what would you have done in my place? I know that I'm only a young mouse, a novice, and not even a proper Redwall member yet. But once you were young too, I know what you would have done. You'd have buckled on your armor, picked up your mighty sword, gone down to that church and battled with the rats until they released the Vols or perished beneath your blade. But alas, those days are gone. I have no magic sword to aid me, only the advice of my elders and betters to which I must listen. Matthias sat down upon the cool stone floor. He gazed longingly up at Martin the warrior. So proud, so brave. What a dashing figure he cut, looking back down to himself in his baggy green robes and oversized sandals. Matthias felt hot tears of shame and frustration spilling from his eyes and dripping onto his young whiskers. Unable to stop himself, he wept freely. The soft touch of a gentle paw on his back caused him to look around. It was Cornflower. Matthias wished he were dead. He quickly turned his face away, knowing she could see his tears. Cornflower, please go away, Matthias sobbed. The little field mouse, however, would not go. She sat down on the floor next to Matthias. Taking the edge of her pinafore, she softly wiped away his tears. For such a shy little mouse, she had quite a bit to say. Matthias, don't be ashamed. I know why you cry and grieve. It is because you are kind and good. Not a hard-hearted, pitiless rat like Clooney. Please listen to me. Even the strongest and bravest must sometimes weep. It shows they have a great heart, one that can feel compassion for others. You are brave, Matthias. Already you have done great things for one so young. I am only a simple country-bred field mouse, but even I can see the courage and leadership in you. A burning brand shows the way, and each day your flame grows brighter. There is none like you, Matthias. You have the sign of greatness upon you. One day Redwall and all the land will be indebted to you. Matthias, you are a true warrior. Matthias, with his eyes dry and his head held high, stood up. He felt himself stand taller than he ever had. He helped Cornflower to her feet and bowed to her. Cornflower, how can I ever thank you for what you've said? You too are a very special mouse. It is late now. Go and get some rest. I think I'll stay here a while longer. The field mouse untied her headband. It was her favorite one, pale yellow, bordered with the cornflowers after which she was named. She tied it to Matthias's arm, the right one, just above the elbow. A maiden's colors for a champion warrior. Silently she crept off. Matthias could feel his heart beating against his chest. He spoke to the image of Martin. "Thank you. You spoke to me through cornflower. You gave me the sign that I asked of you."
Chapter 12. At the Church of St. Ninian, Clooney sat in the wreckage of what had once been a pulpit. Redtooth, Darklaw, Cheese Thief, and Fangburn lounged about at his feet on old Burse hassocks. Clooney was in one of his strange moods again. He showed little interest in the captive Vole family, merely ordering that they be kept under guard until he found time to deal with them. Most of his army slept in the choir loft or the Lady Chapel. The rest were posted on sentry duty outside. Cautiously, his captains watched the warlord. Clooney's long tail swished restlessly. The single eye stared at a carved eagle holding the rotten lectern on its outspread wings. What thoughts occupied the dark, devious mind of Clooney the Scourge? Finally, he looked up and spoke.
"Go and get Shadow. Bring him here to me."
Darklaw and Fangburn scurried off to obey the command. Silently the others waited, their eyes glinting in evil anticipation. The chief had a plan. Like all of his schemes, it would be cunningly simple and wickedly brilliant. There was no better general than Clooney when it came to strategy. Shadow had been with Clooney for many years. Nobody was sure if he was a rat or weasel, or even a bit of both. He was very lithe and wiry, and his long, sinewy body was covered in sleek, black fur. There was no hint of another color in his coat. It was blacker than moonless midnight. His eyes were strangely slanted, black without any brightness in them. The eyes of Shadow were like those of a dead thing. He stood before Clooney, who had to strain his one eye against the darkness of the church to make sure he was really there.
"Shadow, is that you?"
The reply sounded like a whisper of wet silk across a smooth slate.
"Clooney, I am here. Why do you want Shadow?"
The captain shivered at the sound of the voice. Clooney leaned forward.
"Did you see the walls of that abbey today?"
I was there. Shadow sees all.
"Tell me true. Could you climb them?"
No beast I know of could climb those walls.
"Except you."
Except me."
Clooney gestured with his tail.
"Come closer then. I'll tell you what must be done."
Shadow sat to the top of the pulpit step. Clooney issued his orders.
"You will climb to the abbey wall. Many sentries patrol the top of the wall. Take the utmost care. If you get captured, you're of no use to me. There's no point in one alone trying to attack the gatehouse and open the door. It's too well guarded. So forget the gate."
Shadow gave no hint that Clooney had inadvertently read his mind. He remained motionless as Clooney continued.
"Once you have scaled the wall, make for the main abbey door. Should it be locked for the night, you use all your skill to open it without any noise. It is vital that you get inside. The first room you will find yourself in is the main one. The mice call it Great Hall. Walk in, turn around, and on the left wall, facing you, is a long tapestry covered in pictures and designs. Now listen carefully. In the bottom right-hand of the corner of that tapestry is a picture of a mouse dressed in armor, leaning on a big sword. I want it. Cut it, rip it, or tear it out, but get it for me. I must have it. Don't come back without it, Shadow."
Puzzlement was written on the faces of the four captains who had overheard the orders. A picture of a mouse? Clooney had never been known as a collector of pictures. Fangburn whispered to Cheese Thief.
"What use is a picture of a mouse to the chief?"
Clooney heard. He came to the edge of the pulpit. Grasping the sides of the lectern, he surveyed his small congregation like some satanic minister.
"Ah, Brother Fangburn, let me explain. I will tell you why it is that you and all your kind will forever remain servants, while I shall always be the master. Did you not see the faces of those mice today? The mere mention of Martin the Warrior sends them into ecstasies. Don't you see? He is their symbol. His name means the same to those mice as mine does to the Horde. In a different way, maybe. Martin is some sort of angel. I'm the opposite. Think for a moment. If anything were to happen to me, you'd all be leaderless rabble. A headless mob. So if the mice were to lose their most precious omen, the picture of Martin, where would that leave them?
Redtooth slapped his haunches. He rocked to and fro, sniggering with uncontrollable glee.
Brilliant, Chief. Diabolical. They'd just be a crowd of terrified little mice without their wonderful Martin.
Clooney's tail banged down the rotting lectern, smashing it into several fragments.
And that's when we'll strike.
The powerful tail lashed backwards, wrapping itself around Shadow's body. He was dragged forward, face to face with his master. Clooney's rancid breath blasted into Shadow's face as he ground out each syllable.
Bring that picture back here to me. Do this, and your reward will be great when I sit on the abbot's chair in Redwall Abbey. But fail me, and your screams will be heard far beyond the woodland and meadows.
Clooney the Scourge had spoken. Chapter 13. The sun's first rays flung wide the gates of dawn. The inhabitants of Redwall were already up and about. After breakfast, the abbot issued daily orders. All those not employed defending the abbey would husband the crops and gather in supplies for the larders in the event of a prolonged siege. Young otters collected watercress and fished. Cornflower headed a party of mice to reap the early cereal crops. More youngsters tended to the salad gardens. The bright summer morning hummed to the bustle of industrious woodlanders. Ambrose Spike, now sufficiently recovered, sat in the storeroom taking stock. Lots of nuts and preserved berries from last autumn, apples and pears aplenty. Unfortunately, the hedgehog could not check the cellars. Brother Edmund and Friar Hugo had the only 2 keys. He licked his lips at the thought of barrels of nut brown ale, strong cider, creamy stout, and the little kegs. Ah, the dear little kegs, full of elderberry wine, mulberry brandy, blackcurrant port, and wild grape sherry.
Here, Edgepick. Him and us are putting these roots and dandelions, asting up, them right heavy.
Ambrose sighed wistfully as he attended the 2 moles staggering under a bundle of dandelions and tubers.
Oh, them little taters steady, Bill. You tip 'em up. Let go.
More baby moles. Ambrose poured the bandage on his wound. A hedgehog's work was never done. Matthias and Constance stood in the cloisters. They had taken charge of weapon training. The woodlanders were each showing off their special skills. In more peaceful days, these skills had only been used at fairs and sporting contests. But now, when the need arose, they would be used with more deadly effect. The otters carried bags of smooth pebbles which they hurled from vine slings with great force and accuracy. Groups of field mouse archers knocked thistledown shafts to the strings of their longbows. Many a marauding bird had been driven off by these same tiny archers. Bands of Redwall mice practiced at thrust and parry with staves. Below the wall in the abbey grass, Formol directed his crew as they dug up a trench. This was lined with sharpened stakes by a solitary beaver. A system of ropes and pulleys carried the baskets of stone and trench debris up to the ramparts. Defenders piled it in heaps at the edge of the parapet. Matthias took a group of Redwall mice to instruct in the use of the quarterstaff. He had discovered in himself a natural skill with the long ash pole. None of the mice had ever competed in any type of violent sport. They were awkward and timid. But as it was a personal choice between learning cudgel and wrestling from Constance, or quarterstaff from Matthias, to a mouse they had opted for the latter. Matthias found he had to be quite severe with them. Accordingly, he dealt out some hefty blows and hard falls to make the more timid souls angry enough to retaliate. "Keep that head guarded, Brother Anthony." Thwack! "I warned you, brother. Now look out. I'm coming after you again." Thwack! No, don't just stand there, brother. Defend yourself. Hit out at me." Thwack! Crack! This time Matthias sat down hard, rubbing dazedly at his sore head. Constance chuckled. "Well, Matthias, you've only yourself to blame. You asked Brother Anthony to hit out at you, and my word, he's certainly obliged. I'll have to recruit him for my cudgel class. He shows promise." Matthias stood up, smiling ruefully. He rested on his staff. "Yes, he's very strong. But I do wish we had some real weapons of war. Swords and daggers and such like. We won't kill many rats with wooden staves." "Maybe not," the badger replied. "But you must remember that we're here to defend, not to attack or kill." Matthias threw down his staff. He took a dipper of water from an oaken pail, drinking deeply, and splashing the remains over his aching head. "A wise observation, Constance, but you try telling that to Clooney and his horde. See how far you get." Lunch that day was served out in the orchard. Matthias lined up with the other woodland creatures to collect his food. A bowl of fresh milk, a hunk of wheaten loaf,
and some goat's milk cheese. Cornflower was serving. She gave Matthias an extra large wedge of cheese. He rolled up the sleeve of his habit and pulled out the corner of her scarf. "Look, Cornflower, a very close friend gave this to me last night." She laughed at him. "Get along and eat your lunch, Warrior Mouse, or I'll show you my deadly aim with this piece of cheese." Strolling through the dappled shade of the orchard, Matthias sought out old Methuselah. Slumping down beneath a damson tree, the young mouse munched away at his lunch. Methuselah was sitting with his back against the tree, his eyes closed in an apparent doze. Without opening them, he addressed Matthias.
"How goes the practice war, young stave master?"
Matthias watched some of the tiny ants carrying off his fallen breadcrumbs as he answered. "As well as possible, Brother Methuselah. And how are your studies coming along?" Methuselah squinted over the top of his spectacles.
"Knowledge is a thing that one cannot have enough of. It is the fruit of wisdom, to be eaten carefully and digested fully, unlike that lunch that you are bolting down, little friend."
Matthias set his food to one side. "Tell me, what knowledge have you digested lately, old one?" Methuselah took a sip from Matthias's milk bowl.
"Sometimes I think you have a very old head for such a young mouse. What more do you wish to know about Martin the warrior?"
Matthias looked surprised. "How did you know I was going to ask about Martin?" Methuselah wrinkled his nose.
"How do the bee folk know there is a pollen in a flower? Ask away, young one, before I doze off again."
Matthias hesitated a moment, then blurted out, "Brother Methuselah, tell me where Martin lies buried." The old mouse chuckled dryly.
"Next you're going to ask me where to find the great sword of the warrior mouse."
But how did you know that?" stammered Matthias. The ancient gatehouse keeper shrugged his thin shoulders.
"The sword must lie buried with Martin. You would have little use for dusty bones of a bygone hero. A simple deduction, even for one as old as I am."
Then you know where the warrior lies." Methuselah shook his head.
"That is a thing no creature knows. For many long years now, I have puzzled and pored over ancient manuscripts, translating and following hidden trails, always with the same result. Nothing. I have even used my gift of tongues, speaking to the bees and others who can go into places too small for us. But always it is the same. Rumors, legends, and old mouse tales."
Matthias crumbled more bread for the ants. "Then the warrior's sword is only a fable." Methuselah leaned forward indignantly.
"Who said that? Did I?"
"No, but you—"
Nothing of the sort, young mouse. Listen carefully to me. I have an uncanny feeling that you may be the one I have been saving this vital piece of information for."
Matthias forgot his lunch. He listened attentively.
"About 4 summers ago, I treated a sparrowhawk who had pulled a sinew in her foot. She could not use her talons properly. As I remember, I made her promise never to take a mouse as prey. She was a fierce, frightening bird. Have you ever been up close to a sparrowhawk? No, of course you haven't. Well, let me tell you, they can hypnotize small creatures with those savage golden eyes. Born killers they are. But this hawk said something that made me think. She talked of the sparrows, called them winged mice, said that many years ago they had stolen something from our abbey, a treasure that belonged to the mice. Wouldn't say what it was. Just flew off. Who expects gratitude from a sparrowhawk anyway?"
Matthias interrupted. "Have you ever spoken to the sparrows about this something?" Methuselah shook his head.
"I am too old. I can't climb up to the roof where they nest. Besides, the sparrows are odd birds, forever quarreling and chattering in on their strange voices. They are warlike creatures, extremely forgetful and completely savage. They'd throw you from the roof and kill you before you had a chance to get near their tribal nests. Yes, I'm far too old for that sort of thing. And anyhow, I'm not too sure that the sparrowhawk story was true. Some birds can be dreadful liars when they have a mind to be."
Matthias tried questioning Brother Methuselah further, but the warm sun had worked its magic upon the old gatekeeper. As he sat in the orchard, savouring the peace and tranquility of the June afternoon, this time there was no deception. He was genuinely fast asleep. Chapter 14.
Clouds drifted across the sky, obscuring the thin sliver of moon. The Joseph bell tolled out its midnight message to the slumbering countryside. A soft drizzle was falling over the parched meadows and dry woodland, bringing relief after the hot, dry day, damping down the dust from the road. In the ditch, a frog opened its eyes, disturbed by some slight noise from the hedgerow. It blinked. There was 3 figures creeping along, or 2. The frog remained perfectly still. There seemed to be 2 figures and some sort of shadow. The moon came out from behind a cloud. It was 2 huge rats and a dark, shadowy something. They crept along under the cover of the hedge towards the big dwelling of the mousefolk. Rats were hunters. Thankfully, they had not noticed him. The frog stayed motionless and let them pass. It was none of his business. Clooney, Rag-Ear, and Shadow padded noiselessly towards Redwall. This was such an important mission that Clooney had decided to come along and supervise it personally. Around Shadow's waist was strapped a skin pouch. It contained a thin, strong rope, a padded grappling hook, a vial of oil, some lockpicks, and a dagger. Shadow's usual burgling kit. Rag-Ear ambled proudly along, thrilled that he had been specially picked to accompany his chief on such a vital task. Little did he know that Clooney had only included him as an insurance. If they should get into a tight corner, Rag-Ear would serve as an expendable fool. That way, Clooney could make good his own escape. The trio halted beneath the lofty abbey walls. Clooney silenced them with a wave of his tail, then vanished into the night. Rag-Ear felt distinctly nervous at being left alone with Shadow. He attempted a whispered conversation.
Nice drops of rain, eh, Shadow? Good for the grass. Blimey, these walls are pretty high. Glad it's you climbing them and not me. I'd never make it. Too fat.
Rag-Ear's voice trailed off. He fumbled with his whiskers, wilting beneath the basilisk stare of Shadow's dead black eyes. He shuddered and fell silent. Within 10 minutes, Clooney was back. He nodded up at the parapet.
I've been up and down the length of the wall for a fair distance. The sentry mice are all asleep, the fools. They'd never had to do guard duty before. As soon as night falls, so their eyelids. That's what soft living does for you.
Rag-Ear's head bobbed in agreement.
You're right, Chief. If they were in our army and old Redtooth caught them snoozing, he'd...
Shut your trap, stupid, Clooney hissed. Are you ready, Shadow? Now, don't forget your instructions.
Shadow bared his yellowed fangs and started climbing. Slowly, he made his way upwards, like a long black reptile, his claws seeking hidden niches and crevices in the sandstone. Ever upwards, sometimes stopping spread-eagled against the surface as he figured out his next movement, taking full advantage of every crack and joint in the wall. No other animal in Clooney's army could have attempted such an ascent, but Shadow was a climbing expert. He concentrated his whole being on the job in hand, sometimes clinging to the stones by no more than a single claw. Below on the ground, Clooney and Rag-Ear strained their eyes upwards. They could hardly make out his shape. He was not far from the top of the wall. Shadow shifted position and levered with his back legs and tail. Now he wedged his claws into a fissure and stretched upwards, gaining inch by inch. On the top of the wall, Brother Edmund was snoring gently. He was nestled in a pile of rubble, wrapped in a warm blanket, with his hood up against the light rain. Edmund was oblivious to the long, sharp claws that latched themselves over the parapet edge. A moment later, the sleek black head appeared. 2 dense obsidian eyes stared at the sleeping mouse. Shadow had succeeded in climbing the abbey wall. Like a sinuous black lizard, he slithered past slumbering creatures and around rubble heaps, never once making a sound. Friar Hugo mumbled gently in his sleep and moved his head so that his cowl slid off. Drizzle fell upon the fat friar's face, threatening to wake him. Gently as a night breeze, Shadow replaced the hood. Pausing for an instant, Shadow looked about before descending the stone steps from the ramparts to the cloisters. Using shrubs and bushes as cover, he moved furtively forwards, never taking any needless chances or making sudden movements. Sometimes he stopped and waited, letting the minutes tick away as he planned his next progression, gliding like a cloud shadow cast upon the ground by the moon. The door to Great Hall was not locked. Shadow judged that the latch was probably old and creaky. He took out a vial of oil and lubricated the latch and hinges. Carefully, he inched the door ajar. Apart from a tiny squeak, it swung effortlessly open. Sliding inside, he released the door by mistake. A swift night breeze slammed it shut with a dull thud. Shadow cursed inwardly and flung himself behind a nearby pillar. He lay inert, not daring to breathe. 1, 2, 3 minutes. Good. Nobody had been disturbed by the noise. He ventured out to inspect the tapestry that hung upon the wall. A black moth on a moonless night would not have escaped Shadow's notice. He needed no lamp to scrutinize the thing before him. So this was the picture of the warrior mouse that Clooney lusted after. Using his razor-sharp fangs, he began gnawing into the ancient tapestry, working from the tasseled hem upwards. Matthias tossed and turned in his bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. His mind revolved around a host of problems and schemes. The sword, Martin's grave, defense of the abbey, cornflower. Finally, after much kicking and rumpling of sheets, sleep started to take over. He was somewhere in a long deserted room, not unlike Great Hall. A voice called to him.
Matthias!
Go away, the young mouse muttered drowsily. Go get someone else. I'm tired. But the voice persisted, boring into his mind.
Matthias! Matthias, I need you!
He peered down the length of the darkened hall. What is it? Why do you need me? Matthias began to walk towards the voice. He could hear a wicked snigger followed by a cry of despair.
Matthias, help! Don't let them take me!
He ran forwards. The hall seemed to grow longer. Who are you? Where are you? Far ahead in the murky darkness, Matthias could vaguely distinguish a figure leaning out from the wall. It was a mouse in armor.
Please, Matthias, you must help me quickly!
Bump! Matthias landed on the floor of his bedroom. Sheets were tangled about his body. Slowly he sat up and rubbed his eyes. What a strange dream. The long hall, the plea for help, the armored mouse. Matthias felt the fur on the back of his neck rising. Of course it had to be. Great Hall. Martin the warrior. Something terrible was going on downstairs. He was needed urgently. Matthias kicked the sheets from him as he leapt up and dashed headlong from the bedroom, along the dormitory corridor, and helter-skelter down the spiral staircase. Through Cavern Hall he clattered in the darkness, stumbling and tripping over furniture, his heart hammering loudly, and legs pumping like twin pistons. Matthias fell over the top stair and went sprawling into the Great Hall. He lay on the floor, gazing through the gloom to the tapestry. Martin was still there, but he was moving. Was it the breeze? No, it couldn't be. The likeness of the warrior mouse was jigging about as though it were being tugged in some way. Matthias could see a shadow, but there was nothing to cast it. He jumped to his feet and ran forwards as the picture of Martin was ripped away from the tapestry. A rat held it. There was no doubt in Matthias's mind. It was a rat, entirely black from tip to tail, barely indistinguishable from the night itself. Shadow heard the footsteps on the floor behind him. With cold, calculated detachment, he wheeled about as his opponent charged. He was certain to defeat such a small creature in combat, but his orders were to get the picture, not to fight little mice. Besides, there was always the additional hazard that the mouse might hang on to him and shout for help until it came. Like a wraith of oily smoke, Shadow completed a clever double maneuver, bowling his body into a forward roll. He knocked Matthias down like a skittle. Bounding up, he slipped around the door, slammed it, and fled off through the cloisters. Matthias sprang up, roaring at the top of his voice. "Stop that rat! Stop that rat!" Immediately, the mice on sentry duty were alerted. As Shadow ran, he saw Constance dash across the grounds at an angle which cut him off from the stairs up to the ramparts. Switching direction, he made for the next set of stairs, silently cursing the badger. Now he would have to use his climbing rope to descend quickly to the road. Matthias emerged from the abbey. He saw Shadow change direction. Thinking fast, he ran diagonally, catching up with the thief at the foot of the stairs. Throwing himself in a flying tackle, Matthias grabbed Shadow by the legs, sending him crashing to the lower steps. Still clinging to the tapestry, Shadow wriggled like an eel, turning over on its back. He kicked savagely at the young mouse's head with a free foot. Matthias tried valiantly to hang on, but his larger and heavier opponent kicked him viciously in the face again and again. The big bony foot with its sharp claws pounding and gouging away soon took its toll. Matthias went limp and blacked out. Constance had mounted the far steps. Gaining the ramparts, she ran along, dodging the heaps of rubble. She saw Matthias go down under the onslaught of kicks and ran even faster, impeded by mice all around who scattered in panic, thinking they were under mass invasion. The only one besides Constance who had the sense to see what was happening was Cornflower's father. Being nearer the top of the stairs than the badger, he ran straight into the intruder. Shadow was struggling to get out his climbing rope. "Surrender, rat! I've got you!" cried Mr. Fieldmouse as he grabbed hold of the thief, but rummaging in his pouch to free the rope, Shadow's claw had closed on the handle of his dagger. He drew it out swiftly and drove it twice in the Fieldmouse's unprotected body. Constance arrived just as the victim fell wounded. Shadow turned on her with the dagger upraised. Constance swung her paw round in a mighty arc, and it caught Shadow square on the chin. The force of the blow lifted the thief clean off his feet, and before Constance could grab a hold of him, he overbalanced and hurtled over the edge of the parapet with a horrible scream. Downwards he plunged, his body thudding off the unyielding masonry. He landed in the wet roadway with a sickening crunch. Clooney came dashing towards the stricken Shadow, with Rag-Ear scuttling in his wake. Despite his appalling injuries, Shadow managed to lever himself up on one paw.
"Clooney, I'm hurt. Help me," he gasped.
The piece of tapestry lay upon the road. Clooney snatched it up eagerly. Behind him, he could hear the gatehouse bolts being withdrawn amid the shouts of angry mice. Ruthlessly, he kicked at Shadow's broken body.
"Get up and run for it, or stay there, fool. I don't carry cripples or bunglers."
Leaving the injured Shadow to the mice, Clooney sped off across the road. He covered the width of the ditch with a mighty leap and ran off across the meadows. In open country, he could outdistance any mice that dared follow him. Waving the tapestry, Clooney laughed in exhilaration as he put on an extra burst of speed. Rag-Ear had panicked completely. He could not jump the ditch, so he scuttled off down the road in the opposite direction from the way he had come. A group of mice led by Brother Alf tried fording the ditch and climbing up into the meadow. Unfortunately, the rain had made the going hard and slippery. Clooney was long gone, and the tapestry with him. Turning back to Redwall, the pursuers came upon Matthias. He was leaning on Friar Hugo's arm in a dazed condition. Painfully, he staggered up the road to where Shadow lay. Wincing, he cast about, searching the muddy roadway for a fragment of tapestry. "It's got to be here somewhere," cried Matthias. He fell upon the injured Shadow, searching his waist pouch, his flat black eyes clouding over. Shadow watched Matthias. Laconically he spoke. His voice was strangely calm.
"Too late, Mouse. Martin is with Clooney now."
It was the last thing Shadow ever said. He gave one final shudder and lay dead. Chapter 15. Dawn arrived as if it were aware of the previous night's events. Heavy grey skies and steady rain prevailed over Redwall and the Mossflower area. Abbot Mortimer looked old and stern as he addressed the assembly in Cavern Hall. The atmosphere was decidedly subdued.
"Sleeping at your posts, allowing the enemy into our abbey to steal that which we hold most dear? Is this the way you defend us?"
The abbot's shoulders slumped wearily. There was an awkward hush. Anger and guilt lay thick upon the air. The kindly old mouse shook his head and held up a conciliatory paw.
"Forgive me, friends. I criticize you unjustly. We are all creatures of peace, unskilled in the art of war. Yet when I saw the late rose this morning, I could not help but notice that its leaves are all shriveled. The tiny rosebuds have died. Martin the warrior is gone from our abbey. He has left Redwall. We are forsaken. There will be hard and sorrowful days to come without him among us."
The mice and woodland creatures shuffled their feet and gazed at the floor. They knew the truth in their father abbot's words, but hope springs eternal. There was one voice raised, that of Matthias. "A bit of good news," he said. "I've just come from the infirmary. Mr. Fieldmouse is out of danger. He will live." The relief was audible throughout Cavern Hall. Tensions were eased. Even the abbot temporarily forgot his gloomy predictions.
"Thank you, Matthias," he cried. "What heartening news! I must say that the terrible injuries received by Mr. Fieldmouse almost had me believing the worst. But look at yourself, my son. You should be resting. Your face is still swollen after the fight with the black rat."
Matthias gave a lopsided grin. He shrugged cheerfully. "Don't worry about me, Father Abbot. I'll be all right." The mice smiled with pride. A brave little warrior, Matthias. he put new heart into them. Their resolve strengthened as he continued. Black rat indeed. He didn't even scratch me. Well, only a bit. But where is he now, this sly one? Deep under the soil, if the insects are doing their job properly. Listen to me, friends. We of Redwall are a tough lot to kill off. They couldn't finish Ambrose's spike, could they? Why, even the black one armed with a dagger couldn't slay Mr. Field Mouse. So what's a scratch or two to a mouse like me? Cheers for Matthias' speech rang to the rafters. Constance sprang up beside him, shouting heartily. That's the spirit, friends. Now let's see you all back out there at your posts. We'll be wide awake this time, and heaven help any dirty rats that come marching up the Redwall this day. With wild yells very uncharacteristic of peaceful mice, the friends seized their staves and charged out, fired with new zeal. After a while, Constance accompanied the abbot to see Mr. Fieldmouse, while Matthias went with Methuselah to Great Hall. Together they surveyed the torn tapestry. The young mouse stood with his paws folded, an expression of disgust upon his features. The old gatekeeper patted his shoulder.
I know how you feel, Matthias. I could see you were only putting on a brave face for the benefit of the others. That is good. It shows you are learning to be a wise leader. You hide your true feelings and encourage them not to give up hope.
Matthias gingerly touched the swellings on his face. Aye, that's as may be, old one. And you can see as well as I that Martin is gone. Without him, I do not think we can win. Methuselah nodded in agreement.
You are right, my young friend. But what's to be done?
Matthias staggered slightly. He leaned against the wall, rubbing a paw across his brow. I don't know. In fact, the only thing I know right now is that the abbot was right. I think I'd better go lie down for a bit. Refusing Methuselah's help, the young mouse left the old one, gazing at the torn tapestry. He tottered off unsteadily in the direction of the dormitory. On the spiral staircase, he met Cornflower. Hello there, he said, as cheering as he could. How is your father? Cornflower looked at Matthias solicitously. He's doing fine. Thank you, Matthias. I'm just going to get some herbs for the abbot. Shouldn't you be lying down? Your face looks terribly puffy. Matthias winced and leaned against the banister. Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to my room for a good long rest. But don't you worry. Before long, I'll make those rats pay dearly for hurting your father. Matthias staggered weakly into his room. But the moment he closed the door, he became a different mouse. With bright, eager eyes, he groped under the bed and brought forth the waist pouch that had belonged to Shadow. Tucking the long dagger into his belt, he wrapped the climbing rope around his shoulder and said aloud to himself, Right, Clooney. You and I have a score to settle. Keeping a mound of earth between himself and Brother Rufus, Matthias silently looped the rope around a projection at the edge of the parapet. Fortunately for him, Rufus was looking in the opposite direction. Matthias started to slide down the rope on the mossflower side of the wall, where the woods came close up to the abbey. He had imagined the descent would be very difficult, and surprised himself by handling it with ease, his confidence growing as he slid swiftly and noiselessly to the fern-covered ground. Crouched in the undergrowth, he mentally rehearsed his plan of action. He would go through the woods to St. Ninian's Church, avoiding the road that was being watched by sentries. Once at the church, he would discover where the piece of tapestry was kept. Then he would create a diversion of some kind. While Clooney's horde was occupied, he would snatch the tapestry and get back to Redwall with all speed. Matthias ducked deeper into the ferns, and was soon just a silent ripple making through the lush summer green of mossflower towards the church of St. Ninian. Chapter 16. At the camp of Clooney the Scourge, the rat army was girding itself up for war. Weapons were being sharpened upon churchyard headstones. Under the critical eye of Redtooth, a band of rodents was gnawing off a length of planking from a rickety lychgate fence at the rear of the church. Others collected stones to provide ammunition for slings, while some coiled ropes about their bodies. Inside the church, Clooney sat up in the choir loft, the image of barbaric authority. He held the scourging tail in one claw, while gripped in the other was his war standard, topped by the ferret skull with the addition of the tattered tapestry square depicting Martin the warrior. He gazed proudly at it as his armorer dressed him for war. At Clooney's feet were the Vole family. They were bound. He flicked his tail at them and sneered.
Ha! Look at me, you spineless little creatures. Did you ever see such a leader of fighting animals as Clooney the Scourge? Soon I'll have every creature that moves, down on its bended knees to me.
Mr. Abram Vole glared defiantly at his captor.
You filthy bilge rat. Why, I'll...
Silence! Roared Clooney. Hold your tongue, Vole, or I'll deal with you and your family here and now before I set out to conquer your precious abbey. Do you see my new battle flag? That is Martin the Warrior. Yes, the same one who's supposed to protect that doddering old abbot and his witless mob of mice. Now Martin is mine. It's more fitting that he travels at the head of real warriors. He will lead us to victory.
Clooney ranted and raved on, the light of madness in his eye.
Death and desolation shall be the reward of those who dare stand against Clooney. The only ones I'll spare are those I might choose to serve me.
Mrs. Vole struggled upright, but was forced back down by Scumnose and Fangburn. Chattering with rage, she shouted at Clooney.
You'll never bend Redwall to your evil will. Good will prevail. You'll see, Clooney. We are tied up, but our minds are free.
Crack! Clooney lashed out with his long tail, sending the Vole family flat upon the floor. Mr. Abram Vole struggled to shield his wife and son with his body, as the tail flailed out a second time.
Touch a little speech, Vole, but you wrong me. I don't want to capture the spirit of Redwall. I mean to kill it. Take these whiting creatures out of my sight. Lock them in the hut out back. Leave them to imagine what their fate will be when I return.
Colin Vole shrieked in terror. His mother and father struggled bravely as they were dragged off. Redtooth marched in and saluted Clooney.
The horde is ready to march, Chief.
A rat armourer set the war helmet firmly upon Clooney's head. He snapped the visor down and kicked aside the rat who had fixed the poisoned barb on his tail. Striding out into the churchyard, Clooney climbed up on the wrecked gatepost. His fierce eye gazed out across the mighty army. Black rats, brown rats, grey rats, piebald rats, skulking weasels, furtive stoats, and sinuous ferrets, all gathered around, their weapons glistening and dripping with the rain. As Clooney exhorted them, they roared back their frenzied replies.
Where does Clooney's army go? Redwall! Redwall! What is the law of Clooney? Kill! 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 Who will lead you to victory? Clooney! Clooney! Clooney the Scourge!
Springing down among his army, the warlord waved the banner high overhead. With a mighty shout, the horde of Clooney the Scourge marched out upon the road to Redwall Abbey. Chapter 17. Ragier was hopelessly lost. Separated from Clooney, he could not think for himself. Scuttling off down the road in the wrong direction, he had kept on going in a state of funk. Frightened by the sound of a bird chirping suddenly, he rushed blindly into Mossflower Wood and pressed on, deeper and deeper into this strange new territory. It was only with the arrival of pale dawn that he stopped, slumping down under some bushes. Exhausted, soaking wet, and dispirited, he curled up into a wretched damp ball and slept. Sometime about mid-morning, Ragier was awakened by the sound of footsteps. As Matthias tramped past, he lay low, silently congratulating himself. What a find! A little mouse. He would take him prisoner and bring him back alive to Clooney. That way, he could gain some prestige. Clooney might even forget that he panicked and deserted at the Abbey. Matthias risked a swift glance over his shoulder. There was a rat clumsily trying to stalk him, a fat, awkward-looking rodent, but nevertheless an enemy. The young mouse strode onwards, his mind working coolly and without fear, confident that he could handle the situation. Breaking twigs underfoot, stumbling ineptly from tree to tree, Ragier watched the mouse and fantasized.
There was 6 of them, Chief. They tried surrounding me, but I fought like a devil. And then I says to myself, Ragier, says I, you better capture this last one and fetch him back for the Chief to question. Then Clooney will say to me, oh, Ragier, good old Ragier, I knew I could depend on you. Why do you suppose I took you along in the first place? Mage Fur, bring food and wine for my old pal Ragier the Brave. Yes, and then I'll pat the Chief on the back and say, by Satan's whiskers, you old rodent, have you never thought of retiring and let me lead the horde? Why, with a gallant warrior like me and
Thwack!
A long, whippy larch branch sprang forward suddenly. It crashed into Ragia's head, poleaxing him. Matthias stepped out of hiding, rubbing his hands. It had been a strain holding the branch back for so long. Uncoiling Shadow's climbing rope, he bound Ragia paw and claw to a sturdy oak. The young mouse could not afford to wait around for the rat to regain his senses. There was still a deal of travelling to be done. He pressed onwards, leaving his senseless enemy bound to the tree. The rain stopped. Within minutes the hot June sun burst down on Mossflower as if an apology for its absence. Clouds of steaming mist arose from the woodland floor, mingling with the golden shafts slanting down through the trees. The birds began singing. Each flower and blade of grass was decked out in jeweled pedantry with necklaces of sparkling raindrops. The sudden warmth flooded over Matthias, cheering him onwards. Humming a tune beneath his breath, he strode out with a will, almost breaking from the cover of the trees, straight out into the flat meadowland. He checked himself just in time. Directly ahead lay a vast, overgrown area, which was neither pasture nor meadow. It was the common land that had once belonged within the curtilage of St. Ninian's. Matthias crouched at the edge of the woods. He could see the back of the church. There were 10 or 12 rats patrolling it, some distance away. Before he dealt with that problem, there was still the common land to be crossed. Clumps of thistle and slight ground hummocks would be his only cover. The young mouse spoke his thoughts aloud. This could present a little problem. A strange voice answered him.
Problem? Little problem? Well, at least it's not a fully grown adult problem.
Matthias squeaked aloud with fright. Whirling about, he looked for the source of the mystery voice. There was no one about. Taking a grip of himself, he squared his shoulders and called out boldly, "Come out here this instant, and show yourself!" The voice answered. It seemed to come from directly in front of him.
Show myself indeed. How many pairs of voice do you want, young feller? Eh? Fine state of affairs. Bless me soul. What?
Matthias narrowed his eyes and looked hard. Still nothing. "I warn you, come out and show yourself," he shouted irritably. "I'm in no mood for playing games." As if by magic, a lanky hare popped up right beside Matthias, an odd patchworked creature. His fur was an ashen hue with blots of grey and light brown flecked white on the underbelly. He was very tall, with formidable hefty hind legs, and a comical pouched face, topped off with 2 immense ears, which flopped about on their own accord. With a courtly, old-fashioned manner, the hare made a leg, bowing gracefully. His voice carried a slightly affected quaver. "Basil Staghare, at your service, sir. Expert scout, hind leg fighter, wilderness guide, and camouflage specialist. Liberator of tender young crops, carrots, lettuce, and other such strange beasts. Pray tell me, whom I have the pleasure of addressing, and please state the nature of your little problem." Matthias decided the peculiar hare was either slightly mad or tipsy, but his outmoded manner was certainly friendly. The young mouse humoured him accordingly, bowing low with a paw at his waist. "Good day to you, Mr. Basil Staghare. My name is Matthias. I am a novice in the Order of Redwall Mice. My immediate problem is to cross this land to the church over yonder without being discovered by the rats who are guarding it." Basil Staghare tapped one of his huge feet gently on the ground. "Matthias," he laughed. "What an odd name, to be sure." The young mouse laughed back as he replied, "Not half as odd as your own name. Who ever heard of a hare being called Basil Stag?" The hare disappeared momentarily. He reappeared next to Matthias. "Well, hare's the family name, don't you know? My parents named me Basil, though the old mater wanted me to be called Columbine Agnes. Always longed for a young lass, she did." "But why stag?" Matthias inquired.
"Noble creatures, stags," the hare sighed. "Did I ever tell you I want to be one? A magnificent royal stag with great coat-hanger antlers. So, I went down to the jolly old river one night and christened myself Stag. Had 2 toads and a newt as witnesses, you know. Oh yes."
Matthias was unable to hide his merriment. He sat down and chuckled. Basil started chuckling too. He sat down beside Matthias. "I think I'm going to like you, my boy," he cried. "Now, what about getting you to the church? Why, there's nothing simpler. But enough time for that later, young rip.
How about telling me what brings you here?"
I love listening to a good yarn, you know. Oh, by the way, I hope you like fennel and oatcakes." "Of course you do. You'll share lunch with me." "Of course you will. Young and like yourself." In a flash, Basil had lugged a haversack from the undergrowth and was spreading a repast on the grass between them. For the next half hour, Matthias related his story, between mouthfuls of the hare's tasty luncheon. Basil listened intently, interrupting only when he required clarification on some point. Matthias finished his tale and sat back awaiting comment. Basil's long ears flopped up and down like railway signals as he digested his food and his friend's information. Rats. Knew they'd come eventually. Too intelligent on me grapevine, you know. Could feed in the old ears too. As for Redwall, I know it well. Excellent type, Abbot Mortimer. Splendid chap. I heard that Joseph Bell told out the sanctuary message. Even had some cheeky old hedgehog telling me to run for it. Couldn't go, of course. Dear me, no. That'd never do. Chap deserting his post. Bit of a bad show. What? I prefer my own company, you know. Present company accepted, of course. Of course, Matthias agreed. He had taken enormously to the hare. Basil sprang up in a smart military fashion and saluted. Right. First things first. Must get you across the church, young fella, me mouse. I say, that green thingamajig you're wearing. The habit, isn't it? Capital camouflage. You try just lying down anywhere in the shadows. Believe me, you'd have trouble finding yourself. Top hole cover. Absolutely. Basil stopped and ruminated for a moment. His ears lay flat, stood up, then pointed in opposite directions. He continued. Now, when you've liberated your bit of tapestry, or whatever, make straight back across the common. I'll be waiting, never fear. Good? Well, come on, young bucko. We can't sit about here all day like two fat rabbits at a celery chew. Open at him. Quick's the word, and sharp's the action. Nip about a bit, young'un. Again, Basil vanished, only to reappear some 3 yards out on the common. Come on, Matthias. Tack to the left, and wheel to the right. Bob and wave, duck and wriggle. Look, it's easy. Matthias hurried to follow, keeping in mind Basil's instructions. Surprisingly, they seemed to work perfectly, and before long the two friends had covered nearly 3/4 of the common land. Matthias could even count the whiskers on some of the rats. He covered his mouth with a paw to stifle a giggle. It really is quite simple, isn't it, Basil? The hare bobbed up beside him. Capital! Bungo! Like a duck to water, young feller. Float me ears if you aren't the best pupil I've ever had. Oh, by the way, is there anything I can do to help? Matthias stopped and looked serious. Yes, there is, Basil, but I feel reluctant to ask you to involve yourself in my fight. Basil's stag hair snorted. Rubbish! My fight indeed. Do you fondly imagine I sit there munching at the old nosebag, while some ugly great rodent and his band of yahoos run about conquering my countryside? Never let it be said in the mess that Basil Stag Hare was backward and coming forward. Ask away, Matthias, you young curmudgeon. The hare puffed out his narrow chest and stood with paw on heart, his eyes closed and ears standing straight up. He awaited orders. The young mouse, hiding a smile at Basil's noble pose, said admiringly, "Oh, Mr. Hare, you do look heroic standing like that. Thank you." Basil opened one eye to look at himself. Yes, he did look rather gallant. A bit like the monarch of the glen, or the stag at eve. Not that a young mouse would understand anything of that nature. Matthias expressed his wishes to the stag. Would it be possible for you to create some kind of diversion while I'm getting the tapestry? Could you keep the rats occupied, Basil? The hare twitched his ears confidently. Say no more, laddie. You've come to the right stag. Listen carefully. You cut across the flank to their left. They took a piece of planking out of the fence by the lich gate, and that's where you'll slide to. When you've got what you came for, then make your exit the same way. I'll be somewhere about, keeping an eye on you. Right, off you go. Matthias went swiftly, still remembering to bob and weave as Basil had taught him. He made it with ease to the fence, glancing back to check on his companion. Basil went into a speedy run. He cleared the fence top at a bound and tapped the nearest rat on the back. I say, old thing, where's this later fella? Clooney or Looney, whatever you call him. Completely staggered, the rat stood slack-jawed. Basil left him and popped up beside another rat. Phew! Oh, dear, did you chaps ever take a bath? Listen here, you dreadful creature. Do you realise you smell to high heaven? By the way, did your parents ever call you Pungo? Or do they smell as bad as you? It took the rat sentries a moment or two to recover from their surprise. Then they let out yells of rage and tried to seize the impotent hare. It was like trying to catch smoke with their claws. Basil ran rings around them, keeping up a steady stream of insults and adding to the rat's bad temper. They shouted angrily. Grab a big skinny rabbit, lads! Big skinny rabbit yourself, cat's mate. Oh, stick his damn guts in a pike! Temper, tut-tut. Such language, if your mother could hear you. Blast! He's as slippery as a greased pig. Some of my best friends are greased pigs, bottlenose. Oops! Miss me again, you old butterfingers, you. Matthias chuckled quietly and shook his head in admiration. He watched 12 rats falling over each other and bumping heads as they chased his friend around the common land. Every now and then, Basil would pause and strike his noble stag attitude, letting the rats get to within a whisker of him. Nimbly, he would kick out with his long, powerful legs and send them all sprawling in a heap. Adding insult to injury, he danced around the fallen sentries, sprinkling them with daisies until they arose, cursing him to continue the chase. Wary that there might be other rats about, Matthias climbed into the church through a broken stained glass window. He
He dropped down into the Lady Chapel. The young mouse wrinkled his nose in disgust. The beautiful old church was rank with the odor of rats. Furniture was overturned, statuary broken, walls stained. The pages of torn hymn books lay about everywhere. Where was the fragment of tapestry? And where was Clooney with the rest of his army? Instant realization sent a laden weight thudding into the pit of Matthias's stomach. They had gone to attack Redwall. Clooney must have the tapestry with him. Matthias felt sick at the thought. Hastily, he climbed back out the window. Halfway across to the fence, he noticed a small shed. Somebody was pounding upon its locked door and calling his name aloud.
Matthias! Matthias, quickly, over here in the hut!
Through a small gap in the door, he could see the Vole family. Their paws were tightly bound. Colin Vole huddled pitilessly on some dirty sacking in a corner, while Mr. Abram Vole and his wife battered away at the door with their paws tied together. Matthias called through the crack to them. "Stop banging! Stay quiet! I'll have you out of here as soon as I can break the lock." Matthias cast about for something that would force the padlock and hasp. Doubtless some rat had the key, but there was no time for that. By a stroke of luck, he found an iron spike that had been thrown at Basil by one of the rats. Forcing the spike in the hoop of the lock, Matthias levered away. "It's not budging," he muttered. From the corner, Colin Vole started to weep aloud.
Oh, we'll be locked in here until Clooney gets back. I don't want to face him again. Do something, Matthias. Save me.
Despite the Vole's wretched predicament, Matthias could not help showing his contempt for Colin. "Do stop whining, Colin. It doesn't help matters. And keep your voice down. There may still be rats about. Try to be brave like your mum and dad." In his frustration, Matthias swung the spike at the lock. It bounced off, lodging deep between the hasp and the woodwork. He grunted in exasperation, pulling it savagely towards himself to loosen it. Taken off balance, he went head over tail. The hasp had broken. It came away, bringing with it some twisted, rusty screws. The door swung open. Drawing his dagger, Matthias hastily cut bindings from the paws of the voles, issuing orders as he worked. "Follow me, and do as I say. Move as quickly and quietly as you can." Cautiously, they slid through the broken fence and began making their way across the common. There was no sight of the rat sentries. Matthias guessed that they were off somewhere, still trying to catch the elusive hare. It was mid-afternoon. The common was peaceful and sunny. Butterflies perched on thistle flowers, and grasshoppers serenaded each other with their ceaseless cadences. Abram Vole insisted on shaking Matthias by the paw and congratulating him.
"Matthias, thank you with all my heart for saving my family. We thought we were doomed."
The young rescuer looked grim. "We're not back home yet by any means, Mr. Vole. And even if we do make it back to the Abbey, I dread to think what we may find." Mrs. Vole nodded vigorously.
We saw them leave the church to march on Redwall. Clooney was leading the villains with Martin's picture tied to his banner. My, oh my, you never did see so many wild rascals in all your born days."
Matthias's brow creased in a worried frown. "I wish I hadn't sneaked off from the Abbey this morning. I do hope Constance has all the defenders on alert." It was only seconds later that Matthias wished he had also been on alert. The sentry rats had become tired of chasing Basil. Wearily, they made their way out of the woods and back to the common land. They sat on the grass behind a low hummock, taking a break together. Matthias and the Vole family walked straight into the middle of them. Chapter 18. Clooney massed his forces in the roadside ditch opposite Redwall Abbey. He stood well back in the meadow, behind the ditch, surrounded by his captains. Here, where he was out of range, he could direct the entire operation. But at the moment, he was not having things all his own way. For a start, he did not have many archers. Rats are notoriously bad at bow-making and the fletching of arrows. From the ramparts of Redwall, the field and harvest mice sent down volley after volley of tiny arrows which, while they had no great killing power, were causing much wounding and discomfort in the ranks of Clooney's horde. Standing beneath his banner, which was rammed into the earth, Clooney cracked his tail. "Redtooth, Darklaw, tell the sling throws to stand ready. When I give the signal, I want to see a good heavy barrage of stones hitting the top of the parapet. That'll make them keep their heads down. Frogblood, Scumnose, you two will organise the gangs with scaling ladders and grappling hooks. See they all get up on top of that wall, and no blunders." The rat captains marched off to the ditch to make ready. Clooney held his tail to give the signal. On top of the wall, the mouse archers kept up their relentless hail of arrows into the ditch. Constance strode up and down, holding a heavy cudgel in her paws, and she urged them on.
"That's the stuff to give 'em, mace. Keep those bows twanging."
Knowing the supply of arrows was not endless, the badger looked to the heaps of rubble and stone along the parapet edges.
Brother Rufus, Formal, be ready to shift that lot overboard at a moment's notice.
Smack, clang, bang, thud. A hail of sharp stones and pebbles whizzed upwards, rattling against the masonry, as Clooney waved his tail in the meadow below.
Taken unawares, several mice were felled and a mole lay stunned.
Get your heads down, everyone! Lie flat!
Constance shouted. The defenders instantly obeyed as the showers of missiles increased. Running along the ramparts bent double. The abbot cried out,
Stretcher bearers, over here! Help me to get the casualties down into the cloisters.
Winifred the Otter lay alongside Constance and whispered to her.
Hear that scraping? Clooney's lot are putting something up against the walls. It's my guess they'll be trying to climb up while we've got to lie low.
Even as Winifred spoke, 2 grappling hooks with climbing ropes attached came clanging over the parapet and lodged in the joints.
Stay low, my friends, whispered Constance. Give them a bit of time to get off the ground. I want plenty of rats to be high up before we make a move. Pass the word along.
Below in the meadow, Redtooth waved his cutlass and laughed wildly.
Your plan is working out, Chief. Look, there's old Fangburn and his gang nearly at the top of the wall.
Clooney lifted his visor to get a better view. It was too late to call out against what he saw happen next. A veritable avalanche of earth and rocks cascaded over the parapet. It smashed straight onto the main ladder. Rats screamed aloud and grasped at midair as they were swept from the ladder to the road below. The ladder fell sideways, cannoning onto another one that had been set up beside it. As both ladders fell, there were scenes of mass chaos. Badly wounded and shocked, the survivors on the roadway tried to crawl back to the safety of the ditch, only to be buried beneath the rubble, which thundered down on them. Many lay trapped beneath the heavy ladders that had fallen. The air resounded with screams and moans. Clooney ranted and swore. Leaving his standard, he rushed across the meadow. Taking the ditch in a single leap, he darted across the road. Grasping and hanging a rope, he began hauling himself up, claw over claw. As the solitary beaver gnawed through the last strands, the rope parted. Clooney fell from a fair height and sprawled on the dusty road in an undignified heap. Clooney flung himself into the ditch, regrouping the sling throwers and a few archers. He ordered them to await his command. At the top of the walls, the last climbing rope had been severed. A hearty cheer rent the air as the Redwall defenders broke cover to survey their handiwork.
Fire!
Clooney roared. Stones and arrows sped upwards with devastating effect. Several mice and woodlanders cried out and fell. The results heartened Clooney. All was not lost. He began devising a new plan. In Mossflower Wood, Ragier was struggling with the rope that bound him to the oak tree. He could hear far-off sounds, which meant only one thing. His chief was attacking the abbey. Straining his neck downwards in an uncomfortable angle, Ragier was able to get his teeth into the tough climbing rope. If he could manage to free himself, he might be able to sneak back and join the horde. He could mingle with them and deny that he had ever been missing. Clooney might also take a lenient view of his desertion if he could distinguish himself in battle. The rope tasted foul. Ragier could tell by its scent that it had once belonged to Shadow. He'd never liked that surly, poker-faced rodent. Ragier congratulated himself as his teeth bit through another strand.
Ha! Take that rope. That... No rope can keep Ragier prisoner for long. Poor old Shadow. If only you could see your lovely rope now.
Ragier straightened up for a moment to ease his neck. The laughter died on his lips. A horrified gurgle bubbled from his throat. Icy claws of terror gripped his chest. Swaying hypnotically a foot from his face was the biggest, strongest, most evil-looking adder that had ever been born. The rat was completely petrified. The breath seemed to freeze in his lungs. The sinister, blunt head moved in a lazy rhythm, its forked tongue flickering endlessly in and out. The round, bead-like jet eyes never leaving his for an instant. Its voice was like dry leaves rustling in an autumn breeze.
Asmodeus. Asmodeus. It hissed. So kind of you to untie yourself, rat. Come with me. I will show you eternity. Asmodeus. Asmodeus.
It struck with lightning speed. All that Ragier felt was a sudden sharp sting to the side of his neck. His limbs became flaccid, his eyesight shrouded by dark mist. The last words Ragier ever heard on this earth were uttered in the adder's sibilant hiss.
Asmodeus. Asmodeus.
Clooney scratched the floor of the ditch with his claw. It was all there, the design for his next move. He would attack the abbey secretly from the Mossflower side. It would be a surprise maneuver. A hand-picked squad led by him would carry out the mission. Dressed in Clooney's war helmet and armor, Redtooth would stay back in the meadow. His disguise would be sufficient to fool the defenders from the distance of the high walls. The rats in the ditch were ordered to continue pressing home the attack until Clooney and his party scaled the walls from behind and fought their way across the grounds to open the abbey gates. After issuing orders to his remaining captains, Clooney, accompanied by a score of assorted rats, weasels, stoats and ferrets, crept off along the course of the ditch. They carried with them the long plank from St. Ninian's Lich Gate fence. Silently, they travelled in a northerly direction until they were out of sight of the walls. Climbing out of the ditch, they crossed the road into the Mossflower Wood. Clooney sat on a fallen tree trunk and told his squad what was required of them.
I'll wait here with the plank carriers. The rest of you split up and search the area for any big, high trees growing near the abbey walls. Make sure that the tree you pick is higher than the wall itself and not too difficult to climb. Got that? Right, get going.
Clooney watched them strike off into the undergrowth. His previous good mood had deserted him. He was working himself into a foul temper over the day's performance by his mighty conquering horde. Shown up by the simple tactics of woodland creatures and mice, he snorted and dug his powerful claws into the rotten tree trunk, sending beetles and woodlice scurrying as he tore out a chunk of the spongy timber. Oh, he had them frightened at first. As a commander, he knew the power of fright, but once they had gained the upper hand in the initial skirmish, the mice lost their fear and became bolder. That was when the battle had started to go against him. Granted, he had scored 1 or 2 small victories, but they were nothing to brag about. He couldn't use them as an example to put fresh heart into his troops. Clooney's only hope was that the mice would become overconfident and eventually make a mistake. It was the old waiting game. Just let them make one slip. That's all he needed. Meanwhile, he had a greater obstacle to overcome than mice. The walls. It was those same accursed walls that were ruining all his plans. Clooney tore viciously at the rotting log until great chunks of it flew through the air. If this scheme worked, he wouldn't have to worry about walls anymore. He would be inside those walls like a fox among day-old chickens. Clooney sniffed the air. His senses told him the searchers were returning. Cheese Thief and a ferret named Kilconey came crashing out of the underbrush. They were trembling and twitching. Both looked as if they had been badly scared. It was some time before Clooney could get any sense out of them. Cheese Thief spoke haltingly, glancing back fearfully over his shoulder.
We got a bit lost, Chief. Lost? Where?
Clooney snarled. Kilconey pointed a shaky claw.
Over that way, Your Honour. And didn't we find a great strapping oak? Was it close to the wall?
Cheese Thief shook his head.
No, Chief. It was further out into the woods. Look what I found wrapped around the trunk.
He held out the chewed and broken climbing rope. Clooney snatched it.
This looks like Shadow's climbing rope. He's dead. What are you fools trying to tell me?
Kilconey whimpered pitifully.
It's Ragir, Your Honour.
Clooney seized the unlucky pair and shook them soundly.
Have you both gone raving mad? Do you mean to tell me you're frightened of that fool Ragir?
Cheese Thief fell to his knees, sobbing.
But you didn't see him, Chief. He was just lying there. His face was all swollen and his tongue was sticking out. He had gone purple. He was all sort of bloated like. It was horrible.
Kilconey bobbed his head vigorously in agreement.
Aye, so 'twas. Didn't we see him with our very own eyes, sir? Poor old Ragir. And him going backwards all the time. Going backwards? Echoed Clooney. Indeed he was, said the ferret. And your man here says to me, there's something pulling Ragir along. Sure, we couldn't see what it was for all the bushes, so we pulled them to one side between us. What did we see?
Well, what did you see? Barked Clooney irritably. Kilconey stopped and shuddered. He spoke incredulously, as if he were unable to believe himself.
We saw the biggest snake ever clapped eyes on. Father of all serpents. He had poor Ragir's body by the feet and was dragging it along backwards.
Clooney's one eye widened.
What did this serpent do when it saw you? It let go of Ragir and looked at us,
squeaked Cheese Thief.
The serpent stared at us. It kept on saying, Asmodeus, Asmodeus.
Clooney scratched his head with a sharp, dirty claw.
Asmodeus? What's that supposed to mean?
Do ye not know? 'Tis the dreaded name of the devil himself, sir,
wailed the ferret.
I know because me old mother told me so, and she always said never to look a serpent in the eye. So I says to me mate here, "Gee, Steve," says I, "don't look, run for your life." And that's exactly what we did, sir. Oh, you'll never know how horrible it was. I'd rather be tied in a blazing barn than go back there, so I would. A great scaly body of the...
Quiet, fool, said Clooney. I think I hear the others coming back. Now straighten yourselves up and not a word to anyone about this serpent thing, or you'll feel my serpent across your backs.
Clooney's long tail waved menacingly under their noses. They took his point. A weasel called Scrag came running up. He reported smartly with great efficiency.
High tree near the abbey wall, chief. Elm, I think. Much higher than the wall. Lots of branches jutting out. Just a job for climbing.
How far to this tree?
Clooney asked.
About 10 minutes march to the east,
Scrag replied. When the rest of the party arrived back, Clooney had them form up in single file. They marched eastwards at a smart pace. The high tree did prove to be an elm, an ancient giant covered in gnarled bumps and handy branches. Clooney sized it up. Exactly what he wanted. The perfect distance from the wall. He turned to his commando squad.
Listen, we're going to climb this tree. When we get up high enough, I'll find a strong branch that we can bridge to the wall with the plank. If we go carefully, the mice won't suspect a thing. Before they can gather their wits about them, we'll be inside Redwall.
Chapter 19. It was difficult to tell who was the more surprised, Matthias and his party, or the rat's sentries. There was a second's pause, then they scattered. One of the two rats were a bit slow off the mark, but not as slow as Colin Vole and his mother, who were roughly grabbed by the faster sentries. Matthias dodged, wriggled, and ran free, tripping a rat who was about to seize Mr. Vole. The young mouse ran, pushing the Vole in front of him and calling out, "Run! Keep going, Mr. Vole! Try to make it to the woods and hide!" The Vole faltered.
"But my wife, Colin, the rats have got them."
Matthias pushed him roughly forward. "They'll get you too if you don't hurry. Move yourself, Vole. You'll be no good to your family as a prisoner again." Taking Matthias's advice, Abram Vole ran as fast as his legs would carry him. Matthias turned and picked up a heavy branch. He faced the oncoming rats. "Only a dozen of you," he taunted. "Let's see what you rats are made of. First come, first served." Matthias swung the branch. It whooshed through the air, causing the rats to stop in their tracks. As he advanced on them, flailing the branch, he shouted at the top of his voice, "Basil! Basil Staghair, where are you?" The rats tried to circle Matthias. One got too near. A hefty blow from the improvised staff sent him crashing to the ground.
"Oh, well hit, sir. Jolly well hit."
It was the hare. He came bounding up, for all the world as if he were on a Sunday school picnic, grinning from ear to ear. Colin and Mrs. Vole came panting in his wake. Matthias gasped with relief. "Basil, where in heaven's name did you get to?" The skillful creature dodged a rat, spun round, and landed a fierce double-footed kick to its stomach. The rat bowled over, completely winded, all the fight knocked out of its body. Basil chuckled.
"Sorry about that, Matthias, me old lad. When these chaps gave up chasing me, I scooted back to my den. Spring cleaning, you know. A bit late, but I'm only a bachelor in single quarters, what?"
Matthias was flabbergasted. Here he was, fighting off a dozen rats, trying to rescue the Vole family, while Basil was dusting out his den. The young mouse could scarcely hold his temper.
"Oh, how nice of you, Mr. Hare. So glad you could join us,"
he said sarcastically, as they beat off rats and hurried the Voles along.
"I don't suppose you put the kettle on for tea?"
Basil bowed to Mrs. Vole and offered her his paw.
"Hello, me, ma'am. Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. Nothing like a fresh pot of mint tea after some good healthy exercise. What?
Matthias struck a rat square in the face with the butt of his branch. The hare was obviously insane. Mint tea indeed.
"Well, I don't suppose you think I'm going to sit in your den drinking tea all afternoon?"
he yelled. Basil had a hammerlock on a rat. He swung him and knocked two more flat on the ground. He winked at Matthias.
"I certainly hope not, old bean. You see, it'd be parish and awkward, as I've only got a 4-piece tea set. And if I'm not mistaken, the small gent who took off with the woods like a scolded duck is obviously the husband of this delightful Lady Vole. So I'll have to invite him too, won't I?"
Matthias tripped a rat with the branch. He was learning to take Basil at his stride. "Why, of course you will, Mr. Hare. What a boy you must think me. I'll probably just sit around the common here and teach the rats how to make daisy chains." Basil dodged around a rat and laughed approvingly.
"No need to get uppity, young feller. I thought I'd best shelter the Voles and see him safe to the Abbey later. Obviously you need to get back to Redwall post-haste. A family of Voles will only slow you up."
Matthias grinned ruefully. "I apologize, sir. I accept your offer of help greatly. I didn't mean to be rude."
By now, they were at the edge of the common land. The rats had fallen back momentarily. Basil shook paws with Matthias. Good, Mouse.
Right, cut along, young'un. I'll see you when I deliver my chargers back to the Abbey.
Alone and unencumbered, Matthias struck off into the woods, travelling doggedly on wearied legs. He realised that his entry to Redwall would have to be from the Mossflower side, as the main gate would probably be under attack. Could the defenders hold out? Was Constance organising the retaliation correctly without him? Had the sentry stayed alert? Was Cornflower safe? Questions raced through Matthias's brain as he fought his way through the undergrowth. Taking a check on his bearings, he began to worry a little. The Abbey walls should be in sight over towards the northwest. Perhaps he hadn't fully realised the sprawling size of the woodlands. Yes, that was it. Maybe if he kept on trekking, the walls would soon come into view. From somewhere ahead, Matthias could hear the trickle and gurgle of a stream. He remembered that it had been some time since he had eaten and drunk. Changing direction, he followed the water sounds until he came to the banks of the stream. Lying face down on a low outcrop of red sandstone, Matthias drank his fill of the cool, sweet stream water. Further down the bank, he found some young dandelions. Gathering a bunch of tender leaves and buds, he made his way back to the sun-warmed sandstone and stretched out his back, nibbling dandelions and gazing up at the cloudless blue June sky through the treetops. What an action-packed day it had been. Matthias was glad of the brief respite after all the excitement, but he told himself that he could not afford to stay long. He must press on to Redwall. He heaved a great sigh. The life of a warrior was very tiring. Closing his eyes momentarily, he thought of Martin the warrior. Did he ever feel tired? He must have, defending the Abbey with his large, heavy sword, wearing all that armor. Whatever happened to the sword? It had to be somewhere. Legendary weapons didn't rust and wear away to nothing. Otherwise, they'd never get to be legends. A dragonfly hovered directly above the young mouse, gently stirring his whiskers. What was this strange creature doing in his territory? He glided a little closer. It was quite safe. The oddly garbed animal posed no threat to his authority as bailiff of this stretch of water. He was fast asleep, snoring like a squirrel in midwinter, oblivious to all about him. Chapter 20. It was late afternoon. There had been one or two minor setbacks, but Clooney and his squad had finally made it up into the elm tree. Some of the rats were really hopeless climbers in Clooney's estimation. There had been quite a bit of jostling and slipping, and as for that idiot cheese thief, imagine waiting that you were 6 yards above ground to find out that you were afraid and had no head for heights. Clooney thought angrily that if there hadn't been such an urgent need for silence, he would have given him what for. The warlord began to wish that he had brought along more ferrets and weasels. They possessed good natural climbing ability, and that weasel, what was his name? Scrag. He'd been an enormous help, boosting and encouraging the others, even organizing the lifting up of the plank. Clooney made a mental note for future reference. Officer material, that one. Despite all efforts, however, they were still below the edge of the parapet. Higher up, the elm branches became thin and whippy, not strong enough to support the plank's weight. Clooney took stock of the situation. This was really as fast as he could go while still retaining some kind of safety factor on their hazardous assignment. He decided to call a halt.
Right, take a breather. Find somewhere that you won't fall from. In an hour or two it'll be evening. There'll be lots of shadow and less daylight. The mice will have slowed up a bit by then. We'll catch 'em off guard. Scrag, see this lot keep still and quiet, will you?
Scrag saluted smartly and offered a helpful comment.
This branch I'm sitting on, Chief. I've just been testing it. It feels good and strong. Maybe we should mount the plank from here to the wall. It'll reach easily enough. I know it's a bit of an uphill climb, but it shouldn't be too difficult. I don't fancy those branches higher up. They're too thin.
Clooney climbed across and sat next to Scrag. He spoke in a whisper.
Good thinking, Weasel. Yes, this branch will do fine. Stick by me, Scrag. You're a useful soldier. With some of the blockheads I got around me, I could be on the lookout for a new captain soon. You know what that means. Extra loot. A bigger share of the plunder. Clooney always rewards initiative, Scrag. Play your cards right, and you'll soon get promotion.
Thanks, Chief. Don't worry. I won't let you down, Scrag murmured. On a lower branch, Cheese Thief, who had been eavesdropping on the conversation, sneered inwardly. Yes, Chief. No, Chief. 3 bags full, Chief. Who did that snotty weasel think he was? And for Clooney promoting a weasel to captain over rats of his own kind. Well, Redtooth and Darklaw and the others might have something to say about that. Upstart weasel. He'd only joined up a day or two ago.
If he got half the chance, Cheese Thief would fix Scrag all right.
Abbot Mortimer looked thankfully up at the sky. Evening had come. They had lasted out well. The rats had not breached the wall in any way. Most of the main fighting had gone into a lull. Clooney's horde was only making spasmodic sallies from the ditch now. Taking advantage of the interval, the defenders hauled up more rocks and rubble to the ramparts. Cornflower and her band of helpers were on the top of the walls. Keeping their heads low, they moved from post to post, serving each creature a bowl of stew, some wild grapes, and a small loaf of honeyed nut bread.
What a calm, efficient young mouse, Cornflowers,
the abbot remarked to Constance. The badger passed a bundle of arrows to Ambrose Spike for distribution as she replied,
Aye, that she is, Father Abbot. But she looks worried. Matthias, do you think?
Doubtless,
said the abbot dryly.
That young mouse is on my mind as well as hers and yours.
Constance shook her large striped head.
It's not like Matthias to go off like that. I've searched everywhere in my spare moments, but he's not in the Abbey.
Well, wherever he is, I'm certain that he is helping our cause. So we'll just have to await his return and trust to Matthias's judgment and good sense.
The two friends thankfully accepted food from Cornflower and her helpers. Both watched, mystified as Winifred the Otter and Formal hoisted and pulled a seesaw into view. It was a plaything, made in the distant past for the use of infant woodlanders. It had lain near the strawberry patch for as long as anyone could remember. Baby animals played on it throughout the year. As a seesaw, it was in perfect working order. Winifred and Formal set it down on the parapet. Bent double, two moles staggered up, carrying between them an enormous rock. Formal indicated the opposite end of the seesaw.
Put 'em there. That's a nice boulder, my beauties.
The boulder was in position. Winifred and Formal hugged each other tightly. With a nod, they jumped heavily onto the near seat. Whoosh! The big rock catapulted over the top of the parapet. Several seconds of silence followed. Then there was a crash, accompanied by the screams of pain and shock from the rats packed into the ditch below. Winifred and Formal gravely shook paws.
Yeah, we reckon they pesky varmin's got an headache, chuckled Formal,
as everybody on the ramparts ran to seek cover from the retaliatory missiles hurled by Clooney's horde. The battle had started again in earnest. Mouse archers sprang up and loosed their shafts down towards the ditch. Otter sling throwers whipped hard pebbles off with fierce rapidity. Long rat javelins flew upwards, causing death and injury in the ranks of the defenders. But now there was a new hazard. Some inventive rat had devised a fearsome weapon. Chunks of iron grave railings from the churchyard strung to lengths of cord. The rats would swing the cord round and round, gaining momentum until, judging the right direction, they loosed the cord. The missiles sped upwards 2 or 3 times higher than the wall, almost out of sight. Then they would plummet downwards, whistling viciously to burst on the ramparts. Any defender struck by a missile was either instantly killed or horribly maimed. Even if the iron missed its target, the stones and shattered metal fragments ricocheted about dangerously. Realizing the danger of this new device, Constance ordered all but a chosen few to leave the wall for the safety of the Abbey grounds. However, the strung iron bits soon proved to be a two-edged weapon. Many that were released wrongly came hurtling back down into the ditch, sometimes slaying the very creatures that had hurled them. Even Redtooth in Clooney's armor, guarding the standard in the meadow, had to make an undignified scurry to avoid being hit, but he could see the demoralizing effect the missiles were having on the defenders, so he ordered the throwers to continue. Constance bravely stood her ground on the parapet, as did her small band of picked fighters. Whenever one of the missiles landed intact on the rubble pile, she would seize it, standing in full view as she whirled the corded iron round and round, releasing it in a blur of speed. Constance was a far more powerful and accurate thrower than any rat. The attackers bared angry fangs at her from the cover of the ditch. Of all the Redwall defenders, the big badger was the one they most hated and feared. Seated in the branches of the elm tree at the north wall of the Abbey, Clooney watched the shadows lengthen. To the west, the sky was crimson with sunset. Soon he would raise the plank to the parapet. Then let them beware. No tin-pot order of mice was going to stand against the might of Clooney the Scourge. Methuselah the gatehouse keeper stood facing the damaged tapestry in the great hall of Redwall. Being too old for active battle service, he reasoned that the best way he could serve his order was by putting his fertile brain to work. Somewhere there had to be at least a clue, a single lead that might tell him where the resting place of Martin the Warrior could be found, or where he could regain possession of the ancient sword for his abbey. But where? Every now and then over the years, Methuselah had searched through Redwall for Martin and his sword. Now he stepped up his questing activities, alas, with no success.
Vital clues and answers still eluded him. What he needed was a younger, fresher mind to assist him. What a pity that Matthias could not be found. Now there was a young mouse with a head on his shoulders. Long years and much mental strain had taken their toll on the ancient mouse.
Wearily, he swayed on his feet and, putting out a paw to steady himself, he touched the wall, the exact patch of stone over which Martin's likeness had once hung.
Methuselah gave a sigh of satisfaction and allowed a small smile to creep across his features. His search had not been in vain. Beneath his paw, there was writing carved into the dust-covered wall.
Who says that I am dead knows naught at all. I am, that is, 2 mice within Redwall. The warrior sleeps twixt hall and cavern hall. I am, that is, take on my mighty role. Look for the sword in moonlight streaming forth. At night, when day's first hour reflects the north. From o'er the threshold, seek and you will see. I am, that is, my sword will wield for me.
Thank you very much for listening with Sean by the Fire. If you've enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like, share the video around, comment, all that jazz. It really does help me out. Also, I mostly do video game content on this channel, so if you enjoy that kind of stuff, I highly recommend you check it out. Anyway, thanks again, and as always, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what time it is, stay safe, and have a nice day.